Chapter 820. Taking a step forwards, Dongfang Han cupped his hands together. Let me formally introduce myself. My name is Dongfang Han, and I come from the Azure Province's Dongfang bloodline. Qin Yu hesitated for a moment. I am Qin Yu, from the Western Tomb's Qin family. Dongfang Han nodded. Then we can be considered acquaintances. Here, I apologize to you on behalf of Hongyi. She is a simple and pure girl. If she has offended you in any way before, I ask that Mr. Qin Yu does not bother with her. Qin Yu's mind flashed with the image of that fierce, red-clothed girl. He scratched his head in confusion. Was this a form of reconciliation? I have never taken this matter to heart. Mr. Dongfang, please rest assured. Dongfang Han's expression was cold, and he rarely revealed any emotions. But at this time he revealed a faint smile. It was clear that he did care about Su Hongyi. But then, Qin Yu was caught off guard. Dongfang Han looked up, his eyes shining with a piercing light. Then we can make our move now. What situation was this? Wasn't this supposed to be reconciliation? Qin Yu was stunned for a long time before he managed to regain his composure. This Dongfang boy was simply worried that today's matters would be blamed on Su Hongyi. Thus he had said those words. Even in this situation, Qin Yu didn't know whether to laugh or to cry. How did you know that what I said was true? But soon, Qin Yu revealed a dignified expression. He could feel a threat coming from Dongfang Han. It was like invisible needles were stabbing into his flesh, making him feel waves of pain. Stepping down, Dongfang Han rushed forwards. At this moment, he changed from an iceberg to an erupting volcano. A wild aura broke out from his body. The air violently twisted, and one could faintly hear the roars of a great beast. A beast phantom with 4 limbs and 2 horns on its head appeared above Qin Yu's head. As Dongfang Han punched out, the beast phantom howled and fused into it. Qin Yu's eyes were dignified. He didn't dodge at all. His feet continued to fall. Facing this wild aura, he was like a flood dragon swimming against the current. Bang! There was a heaven-shaking explosion. A terrifying shockwave of strength instantly erupted. It was like a raging flood, destroying everything in its path. The ground was easily plowed open. The soil and stones were mixed together and crushed into fine powder, rolling and whistling forward. The ancient tree beneath Qin Yu's feet was torn apart, followed by a second, a third. It was like a meteor falling from the skies. With the 2 of them at the center, destructive fluctuations spread outwards. Qin Yu was forced backwards again and again. Every step he took caused the earth to rumble, diverting the powerful strength that his mortal body had to withstand. On the other side, Dongfang Han's toes touched the ground as he retreated explosively. Wherever his figure passed, the ground would split open and form a giant gorge. On the surface, they were evenly matched in their first exchange. Dongfang Han's eyes shone even brighter. He didn't pause for even a moment. After dispelling the remaining power of this strike, he stomped down like a tiger descending a mountain. Roar! Between heaven and earth, the roar of a giant beast suddenly erupted, and another giant beast phantom slowly appeared behind him. Who would have thought that Dongfang Han, who had a cold and aloof aura, would cultivate such a violent and domineering cultivation technique? As the 2 of them fought, their auras burst forth and swept through the surroundings. It was like a hurricane in the ocean. Even though they were far away, they could clearly feel it. An azure-robed cultivator condensed a rune in his palm and sent it into the body of the demonic beast in front of him. His heart relaxed, and he revealed a look of joy. Success! In order to subdue this demonic beast, he had wasted a great deal of time. Nearly all the other demonic beasts he had subdued before had been killed in the process. But as long as he could subdue this demonic beast, everything was worth it. Now, it's time to reveal my true strength. I will definitely have a place in the qualifications to enter the mystic realm. As the azure-robed cultivator muttered to himself, he put away the demonic beast. Just as he was about to leave, his complexion suddenly changed. He looked up at the distant mountains. Even though there was a mountain range separating them, it still couldn't stop the terrifying aura that was constantly spreading out from the other side. Powerhouses were fighting. The azure-robed cultivators' eyes brightened. If there weren't enough benefits, powerhouses of this level absolutely wouldn't engage in a conflict. It was likely that both sides had a considerable number of participation tokens on them. As long as they defeated each other, they would be able to obtain 10 tokens. If it were before, the azure-robed cultivator might not have dared to join in on the fun. But now that he had subdued this demonic beast, his confidence rose. After a moment of hesitation, the azure-robed cultivator's figure flickered, and he raced towards the distant mountain range. The black wolf galloped through the forest. Its body was strong, and its eyes were proud. Powerful demonic energy surged around its body, and its every move revealed the aura of a beast king. But now it was riding an ordinary-looking cultivator. On its shoulder was a golden-clawed, golden-eyed eagle. Although its body was less than 3 feet long, the aura it released was faintly stronger than the black wolf's. At this moment, the eagle's eyes were locked onto the distance. The ordinary-looking cultivator turned around and whispered a few words. The eagle let out a low cry. The two seemed to be communicating. That direction. The ordinary-looking cultivator pointed. The black wolf roared, and its figure instantly sped up, disappearing from sight in the blink of an eye. At the same time, many other cultivators could feel the terrifying aura of the battle. Let's go and see if there's a chance to fish in troubled waters. Such a commotion will definitely attract a large number of cultivators. I don't dare to have any ideas about them, but I can take the opportunity to steal someone else's token. Hurry up and leave. I don't have the qualifications to interfere in a battle between powerhouses like this. Everyone made different choices, but after a brief moment of hesitation, they gathered from all directions. If they ran into some dog-shit luck, they might be able to pick up a great bargain. Although the chances weren't high, there was always a possibility. Dongfang Han, 3rd place in the semifinals. He is a genius of the Dongfang family and is rumored to be extremely strong. Who is that? He can actually compete with Dongfang Han, and I don't even have the slightest impression of him. I've seen this person before. At a banquet not too long ago, he was the one who slapped Luo his face in front of everyone. He really isn't ordinary. At the edge of the battlefield, participants stopped one after another. They looked at the changes occurring on the battlefield. Their eyes filled with amazement. Bang! After another collision, Qin Yu frowned. He looked at Dongfang Han across from him. Dongfang Han's complexion was pale. It was clear he had consumed a great deal of energy. But the threat Qin Yu felt didn't weaken at all. Rather, it became even more intense. It was clear he hadn't used his trump card yet. Although Qin Yu also had a trump card in his hand, once he used it, it would draw a great deal of attention and stir up other troubles. Thinking of this, Qin Yu's frown deepened. But what he didn't know was that across from him, Dongfang Han was 10 times more shocked and 10 times more hesitant than Qin Yu. Through lucky chances and coincidences, he had obtained tremendous benefits in his early years of cultivation. With the full support of the Dongfang family, he was able to have his current achievements. He never imagined that a mere disciple of the Qin family would be evenly matched with him. Even after fighting for so long, he hadn't been able to obtain the slightest advantage. Moreover, what left Dongfang Han feeling even more dread was that he could feel a deeply hidden and terrifying aura coming from Qin Yu's body. It was like crimson magma flowing beneath a layer of ice. Dongfang Han wasn't sure what this was, but he knew that once it erupted, it would surely be earth-shaking. Even if he had a trump card in his hand, he didn't have much confidence he could defeat Qin Yu. Moreover, if he used this trump card, it would cause a tremendous loss to him. In the final selection, once he fell into a weakened state, even if he won in the end, it would only be a wedding dress for others. His thoughts raced. Dongfang Han slowly looked up, his eyes meeting Qin Yu's. Without needing to communicate, he immediately understood the other's meaning. This sort of feeling was quite wonderful. Qin Yu thought for a moment and slowly nodded. Bang, bang, their auras erupted. But this time, they didn't rush at each other. Instead, they turned around and flew backwards. In the dark, the participants that were watching the two fight felt their hearts shrink and their complexions change. This is bad. Hurry and run. Run. With loud shouts, figures began to flee into the distance. The reason Qin Yu fought with Dongfang Han was to seize a participation token and become the final victor of the final selection. This was the key point. If one side could easily win, then there was nothing to say. But since everyone had scruples, there was no need to fight to the death. After all, there wasn't any deep hatred between them. There was also another point. The two of them now had a better choice. Among the cultivators that had been drawn here, there were several that had fairly strong auras. As long as they could kill off two of them, it wouldn't be difficult to gather enough tokens. How hateful! These two people set a trap. They deliberately led us here. Many cultivators cursed out loud as they fled, feeling as if they had been fooled. The blue-robed cultivator was expressionless. He left behind a series of afterimages as he raced forwards at an astonishing speed. If there was an opportunity, he didn't mind attacking. But in a direct confrontation, if he wasn't careful, others might take advantage of him. In this sort of situation, he certainly didn't want to become a target. But soon, the blue-robed cultivator's complexion changed. He could feel an icy cold aura locking onto him from afar. It had actually chosen him as its target? The blue-robed cultivator sneered inwardly. He turned his head, a look of panic on his face. His aura rose once more, and he sped up even more. Whoosh! He immediately overtook everyone and fled into the distance. After a brief pause, the icy cold aura that had locked onto him accelerated, chasing after him without hesitation. Everyone dodged. In addition to the two people's astonishing speed, they soon vanished from their senses. A moment later, the blue-robed cultivator swept his eyes around. He took a step forward and came to a sudden stop. He slowly turned around, his expression grim. This distance should be safe enough. As long as he was a bit faster, there shouldn't be any problems. Whoosh! With the sound of breaking air, Qin Yu landed on the ground. He lightly said, "You aren't planning on running away?" The blue-robed cultivator sneered. "I admit that you are strong, but if you want to take away the token in my hand, I fear you aren't qualified." He lifted a hand, and the monster beast he had just subdued appeared. Now that he was closer, he discovered that it was actually a small fox. Its gray fur was a mess, and there were even several burn marks on it. It seemed a bit dispirited. What was strange was that a third eye had opened between the eyes of this gray fox. It was vertical from top to bottom, and its surface was dark red. At this time, the gray fox was staring at Qin Yu. The third eye on its forehead trembled and then slowly opened. It was a deep red. The gray fox's third eye seemed to hide an entire sea of blood. When its gaze fell on Qin Yu, his mind was instantly dragged in. Qin Yu's complexion changed. But before he could respond, he froze in place, his eyes empty and lifeless. It was like he had lost his soul. The blue-robed cultivator revealed a happy expression. He had succeeded. Without any hesitation, he took a step forward and held forwards. Looking at Qin Yu's dazed appearance, a trace of hesitation flashed in his eyes. Then it turned to ruthlessness. The gray fox was his greatest trump card. The fewer people that knew about it, the better. Moreover, with today's conflict, if they met again in the future, they would surely be enemies. This Qin Yu had been hiding his abilities even during the semi-finals. From this, it could be seen that he was an ambitious person with great ambitions. Now that his plans had been ruined, he definitely wouldn't give up. Bang! The blue-robed cultivator punched out a fist. His fist was wrapped in flames as it smashed down towards Qin Yu's forehead. Die! Bang! With a dull thumping sound, the blue-robed cultivator's chest instantly caved in. His eyes popped open and bulged out. In the next moment, he was sent flying backwards at an even faster speed. Several ancient trees behind him were torn apart by a powerful shockwave before he could even crash into them. After flying a long distance, he crashed into a stone wall. The blue-robed cultivator's body was embedded in the wall, and cracks spread out like a spider web. The sound of footsteps approached. Qin Yu stood in front of the blue-robed cultivator, his expression faint. "You wanted to kill me first, so don't blame others." The blue-robed cultivator's lips moved, but he didn't say a single word. Dark red blood gushed out from every orifice of his head, and his head tilted to the side as he died on the spot. Qin Yu's sudden eruption of fist had scattered apart all of the blue-robed cultivator's vitality. He didn't even have the chance to admit defeat and leave the martial field. Without expression, Qin Yu didn't feel any pity for what had happened. He stepped forwards and found a token on the blue-robed cultivator's body. With a light cracking sound, the token disintegrated into powder. Then, for more dots of light appeared on his own token. With 9 tokens in hand, he only lacked one more spot, and he would be able to obtain one of the final 10 spots. At this time, Qin Yu's eyebrows shot up. He looked at the token in his hand, surprise in his eyes. For such a change to occur after collecting all 9 tokens was beyond his expectations. But thinking about it, anyone that could obtain all 9 tokens was bound to be incredibly strong. If the aura released by the token was too strong, and he couldn't obtain the last one, then that would only be delaying him. As his thoughts raced, Qin Yu put away the token and turned to look at a crooked tree behind him. Just now it was a bit further away, and only a few thick branches had been twisted apart. The main body was still intact. If it weren't for the prompt from the token, even now Qin Yu wouldn't have been able to sense anything. This concealment method was truly brilliant. "Come out." Qin Yu's expression was calm. He looked straight at the place where the token was sensing. After several breaths of silence, the surface of the tree began to ripple like water. A cultivator stepped out. His face was deathly pale and his eyes were filled with fear. He looked at Qin Yu and shivered. The words "kill" to "silence" the witness reverberated in his mind. This person wanted to run away, but after seeing the blue-robed cultivator die, he was sure that Qin Yu could kill him before he could even leave the martial field. In truth, Qin Yu did have this thought, but thinking about it, his current identity was simply borrowed. So what if others found out? Leave behind the token. The cultivator across from him was stunned for a moment before his face lit up with joy. He trembled and said, "Mister, please rest assured that I will not say a single word today." As he spoke, he took out the token and shouted that he would forfeit the competition. Spatial fluctuations descended and his figure distorted, vanishing from sight. Qin Yu picked up the token from the ground. As it crumbled to powder, a 10th dot of light appeared. The token trembled and its surface instantly changed. From the original pale white, it turned into a translucent jade color. At the same time, a massive number of lines automatically appeared, weaving together and covering the entire token. When all the lines appeared, the aura emitted by the token suddenly converged, condensing several feet around Qin Yu's body. It was like an invisible barrier that covered Qin Yu within. Within the barrier, all of his aura was isolated from the outside world. Qin Yu came to a conclusion. As long as he didn't jump out on his own initiative, he could just lie down somewhere. As long as his luck wasn't so bad that someone stepped on his face, he could safely wait until the end of the competition. Qin Yu smiled, a look of appreciation on his face. This beast trainer tournament really had some tricks up its sleeve. Just as he was about to turn around and leave, his feet suddenly stopped. His figure flickered, and he appeared at the place where he first killed that person. He had almost forgotten something. Looking around, he saw the gray fox. It was struggling with difficulty, trying to escape from here. But it was clear that opening its third eye had consumed too much of its strength, and it was in an extremely weak state. Even though Chinyu had delayed it, it still hadn't been able to leave. At this time, as Chinyu's eyes locked onto it, the gray fox smartly stopped. It looked up, a pleading look in its eyes. Even if I let you leave with your current condition, you will soon be killed by other monster beasts. Chinyu lightly said. The gray fox's eyes brightened. It lifted a paw and pointed in front of it. It lay on the ground and kowtowed towards him, crying out several times. Chinyu frowned. Do you have some other reason that you must go? The gray fox quickly nodded. Chinyu looked at it, deep in thought. He couldn't determine whether what the gray fox said was true or false. As time passed, the gray fox gradually fell into despair. Large teardrops fell from its eyes. Chinyu glanced at it and let out a breath. All right, let me see where you want to go. By relying on the sensing ability of the token, Chinyu easily avoided the final cultivators. Following the gray fox's guidance, he found a hidden cave. The cave entrance wasn't large, but as his flesh and bones began to explode, Chinyu's body shrank at a speed visible to the naked eye. He lowered his head and drilled in. Although the location was hidden, the air inside wasn't turbid. It was clear that there were other vents. The stone walls should have contained some sort of impurities that emitted a faint halo of light in the darkness. Although it wasn't bright, it was enough to clearly see what was happening inside. In a soft and dry pile of hay, there was a group of small, chubby, pink creatures that were weakly whimpering. Their eyes hadn't opened yet, so they didn't know that their mother wasn't here. In their hunger, they could only raise their heads and wiggle about as they searched. There was no need to say anything more. Feeling the gray fox's struggles, Chinyu let go. With a whoosh, it scuttled over and finally found its mother. It hurriedly stuck its head under its mother's belly. Smack, smack. There was a sucking sound in the cave. The gray fox licked this and that, occasionally looking up at Chinyu with gratitude in its eyes. Chapter 8:21. The final selection was over. Feeling the strength of the array formation descend upon him, Chinyu didn't resist. He glanced at the gray fox and its child that had just opened its eyes. In the next moment, he vanished in a spatial fluctuation. A tearing feeling spread through his body. This time, it lasted for a much shorter time than when he entered the arena. In just several breaths of time, the world around him brightened. Chinyu narrowed his eyes, adapting to the changes in light. He looked around. This place was no longer the island from before. From the transmission time, he was much closer to the arena. The participation jade token in his chest began to heat up. Chinyu took it out, and several messages appeared in his mind. The first was to congratulate him on becoming one of the 10 finalists and obtaining the qualifications to enter the mystic realm. The second was to inform him of the arrangements before entering the mystic realm. These people needed to wait here for 3 days before being allowed to enter. The third was to inform him of the list of 10 finalists and their ranking. As for the ranking, it was based on the strength of the person who obtained the token. Chinyu was ranked 6th. He didn't care about this. As long as he entered the list of 10, he could enter the Alliance mystic realm. That was enough. But soon, Chinyu's eyebrows rose up, surprise in his eyes. Dongfang Han wasn't on the list. In other words, he had been eliminated in the final selection arena. In truth, this was beyond Chinyu's expectations. After all, the two of them had fought before, and Chinyu was well aware of his strength. Even if he attacked with all his strength, he didn't have absolute confidence he could defeat Dongfang Han. But the final selection arena was filled with crouching tigers and hidden dragons. Since he and Dongfang Han were present, it was possible that there were several other tyrannical geniuses present. If his luck was a bit worse or some accident occurred, causing him to be defeated, all of these were possible outcomes. So, Chinyu was only surprised for a moment before suppressing these thoughts. He continued to look. As expected, Luo he was on the list. Moreover, just like the first and second selections, she was ranked first. She was truly worthy of being called a genius. Qin Yu looked at this name several times before putting away the jade token. The Alliance cultivator, standing outside the range of the array formation, waited for Qin Yu to read through the information before walking over. He cupped his hands together and bowed. Congratulations to Mr. Qin Yu for entering the list of 10. To be able to enter the mystic realm is the dream of all Alliance cultivators. This person's smile was warm and amiable. It was clear that he was a sociable person. With just a few words, he not only complimented Qin Yu, but also drew their relationship closer. Seeing Qin Yu nod without saying anything, the man's smile didn't diminish. You just left the arena, so Mr. must be tired. The island has already prepared a room for you. If Mr. doesn't have any other arrangements, I will lead you to a room to rest. Qin Yu said, I'll have to trouble you. He would only be staying on this island for 3 days before entering the Alliance's mystic realm to dig up graves and steal the ice soul jade bed. Once this matter was exposed, it was only natural that the Alliance would hunt him down. All right, even if everything went smoothly, his current identity was destined to not continue to be used. Thus, Qin Yu didn't have any thoughts of using his current status to make friends with others for benefits. He entered the residence that the Alliance had arranged for him. His eyes calmly swept over the luxurious and exquisite decorations. He decided that for the next 3 days, he would use the excuse of healing his wounds to stay in his room. But the truth was that Qin Yu's tranquility was broken the next day. He pushed open the door and saw the Alliance cultivator that had welcomed him yesterday. Perhaps because he saw Qin Yu's complexion wasn't too good, this person swallowed his words and went straight to the point. Mr. Qin Yu, 3 of your friends have arrived outside the island. They say they have important matters to discuss with you. Friends? Qin Yu immediately thought of Doralice, Yundai, and Old Lin. Did something happen? He suppressed his thoughts and nodded. Bring them in. Qin Yu said them, but a moment later, the ones who appeared in front of him were Akshaym. Seeing the Shui family sisters and the red-clothed young girl, Qin Yu immediately understood that he was wrong. But what urgent matter could these 3 people have to see him for? Feeling the nervousness in Shuiya and Shui Qingqing's eyes, and then looking at Su Hongyi's clearly red eyes, Qin Yu didn't reveal his inner thoughts. He said to the Alliance cultivator, I'll have to trouble you. The Alliance cultivator smiled and waved his hand, bidding his farewells, and then leaving. The final selection smoothly ended. He could clearly feel that the atmosphere within the Alliance had become much more relaxed. Otherwise, if the atmosphere was as serious as before, he definitely wouldn't have dared to bring these 3 women to the island. Of course, there was another important reason. The ones who came to see Qin Yu today were 3 young and beautiful women. Moreover, one of them was clearly emotional and her eyes were red from crying. Who knew what their relationship was and what had happened between them? If he tried to stop them and delayed something, Qin Yu would definitely look into his responsibilities afterwards. The final list of 10 people, those that could reach this step, whether or not they joined the Alliance, were destined to become characters that could shake the world in the future. If he could avoid offending them, then it was best not to. He brought the 3 women into a room and closed the door. Qin Yu frowned. Why are you here? Without waiting for the Shui family sisters to speak, Su Hongyi said in a hoarse voice, I was the one who asked them to bring me here. Mr. Qin Yu, please don't blame them. Qin Yu glanced at her, not speaking. He thought that they weren't familiar with each other, and strictly speaking, there were even some grudges between them. Moreover, why were you looking for me? Su Hongyi looked at Qin Yu. Big brother, Dongfang, died. With just these words, large beads of tears began to roll down her red eyes. Qin Yu was stunned for a moment before he responded. The person she was speaking of was Dongfang Han. His first thought was that this was impossible. With Dongfang Han's strength, it was possible that he had been accidentally eliminated, but to be killed by someone else was simply a joke. As long as he used his trump card, Qin Yu believed that no one in the final selection arena could stop him from leaving. If there was then the entire final selection arena could sense it, so there was no reason he wouldn't know. But looking at Su Hongyi's silent tears and her sorrowful appearance, this matter didn't seem fake. Qin Yu turned to look at the Shui family sisters. The two of them nodded at him, and his heart sank. Dongfang Han really had died. He couldn't say what he was feeling. Strictly speaking, the two of them only truly knew each other before they fought. There was no friendship between them at all. But at the end of their fight, the two of them were able to guess each other's thoughts with just a single glance. This left a deep impression on Qin Yu. It might be a bit pretentious to say that they appreciated each other's talents, but Qin Yu couldn't deny that he had a very good impression of Dongfang Han, who looked cold and aloof on the outside and was like a madman when he fought. Qin Yu's expression changed, causing Su Hongyi to feel anticipation rise in her heart. After a moment of silence, he slowly said, "If something like this happened, then Miss Su should have gone to notify the Dongfang family. Why did you come looking for me?" Su Hongyi stared at him. "It's useless to look for them. I know that only you can help me take revenge for Brother Dongfang." Qin Yu frowned. He had a good impression of Dongfang Han, but it wasn't to the point of wanting to take revenge for him. Moreover, in the final selection arena, everyone would be competing with each other. If they were not careful, they might even lose their lives. There was no reason for him to intervene in such a matter. Qin Yu shook his head without hesitation. "I'm sorry, Miss Su. I know that you are very sad right now, but I need to prepare to enter the mystic realm. If there is nothing else, please leave." "Wait!" Su Hongyi screamed. Big Brother Dongfang was killed by Luo He. Luo River. As this name entered his ears, Qin Yu frowned. He had an impression that East Fang Han had a very good relationship with this person. Why would he kill Dongfang Han? Was there some other secret behind this? Glancing at Su Hongyi, Qin Yu said in a low voice, "Do you have evidence?" Su Hongyi sadly shook her head. "I don't, but I can confirm that the one who killed Big Brother Dongfang was Luo He." Qin Yu remained expressionless. If he couldn't bring out any evidence, then he couldn't just believe whatever she said. Su Hongyi clenched her teeth. She suddenly lifted a hand and pointed between her eyebrows. Her black pupils suddenly enlarged until they occupied over 2/3 of her eyes, leaving only a few whites at the corners. She looked at Qin Yu and paused for a moment. Then she said, "Not too long ago, you killed someone in the final selection arena. It was a man." Qin Yu's eyes turned cold. Su Hongyi hurriedly said, "I don't have any other meaning. I just want to tell you that I was born with a special ability that allows me to see the blood of cultivators. For familiar people, I can even smell the scent of their blood." After leaving the final selection arena, Luo he brought back Big Brother Dongfang Han's corpse. Although he disguised it well, saying that an accident occurred when he was dealing with a powerful monster beast, I am sure that I didn't see wrong. His body was stained with Big Brother Dongfang's blood. Qin Yu remained silent. He was considering whether Su Hongyi was telling the truth or not. Although her eyes were strange and she had accurately judged what had happened to his body, he had no choice but to be cautious. The reason for this was all because of Luo He. From the start, he felt an inexplicable hostility towards this person. And now Dongfang Han's death was linked to him. Who knew whether or not this was a trap deliberately aimed at him? Towards the unknown, Qin Yu never dared to be the least bit careless. In this world, those who were careless wouldn't live for long. Seeing Qin Yu remain silent, Su Hongyi revealed another inside story. Big Brother Dongfang died in my arms. He personally told me that the one who killed him was Luo He. He told me not to reveal anything strange. Otherwise, I would be silenced. I swear that not a single word I said was false. Otherwise, I will die a horrible death. Qin Yu said in a low voice, "Why didn't you say anything just now?" Su Hongyi's voice was hoarse. "Before Big Brother Dongfang died, he forced me to vow that I would never take revenge on Luo He, and he also told me not to look for you. He seemed to be well aware of your strength. Moreover, I could see that you were already hostile towards Luo He. She looked up. Mr. Qinyu, I don't know why you are dissatisfied with Luo He, but he is our common enemy. Right now, only you can help Big Brother Dongfang take revenge. As long as you agree to help, I will give this to you. She took out a jade pendant from her chest. It was shaped like a large fish, and its surface was carved with scales. Although it wasn't clear, it gave off a lively feeling. This comes from the Beast Trainer Alliance's mystic realm and is inextricably linked to it. And Big Brother Dongfang also has a similar jade pendant. As long as one can gather both pieces, they will have a chance to obtain a massive good fortune in the mystic realm. However, Big Brother Dongfang's piece has already been lost. I dare to conclude that it is on Luo He. Mr. Qinyu, this is the greatest sincerity and reward I can give you. I ask that you help me. Help the deceased Big Brother Dongfang. Qin, you was silent for a moment. Why is this jade pendant on you? Su Hongyi silently wept once more. A month ago, I was engaged to Big Brother Dongfang. This jade pendant was the Dongfang family's betrothal gift. Looking at Su Hongyi, who exuded a deep sorrow from within, Qinyu was silent for an even longer time. He looked at the jade pendant in her hand and slowly said, I can promise you that if there is a chance, I will help, but I cannot guarantee anything. The reason he agreed to help was because of his favorable impression of Dongfang Han, because of his inexplicable hostility towards Luo He, and also because of Su Hongyi's heartfelt sorrow. But Qinyu had to admit that the most fundamental reason was the jade pendant that Su Hongyi took out. Although he didn't know what this jade pendant was, the moment he saw it, the ancient's heart that had fused with Qinyu's chest began to beat faster. Qinyu's intuition told him that Su Hongyi wasn't lying. This jade pendant was a treasure, and it was likely to be related to the lucky chances in the mystic realm. Moreover, what was even more mysterious was that Qinyu felt that this lucky chance should have been his to begin with. Su Hongyi didn't hesitate. She offered the jade pendant with both hands. I agree. 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. When the token began to heat up once more, a message was transmitted. It was time to enter the mystic realm. When Qinyu pushed open the door, the alliance cultivator who had welcomed him was already waiting outside. He respectfully said, Mr. Qinyu, please follow me. He hurriedly walked to the center of the island and arrived outside a strange temple. The reason it was strange was because the material used to construct this temple was extremely rare. It was a crystallized form similar to ice, and cold energy rose up from it. But what was strange was that after approaching it, not only did he not feel the slightest chill, but the air seemed to heat up as if it would burn. Around the temple, there were many black armored guards that only revealed their eyes. A sharp light surged from their eyes, sharp and fierce. The alliance cultivator stopped. Mr. Qinyu, this is as far as I can bring you. After he finished speaking, he bowed. I wish Mr. Qinyu good luck in entering the mystic realm. He turned and left. Qinyu paused for a moment. Then he stepped into the temple. With the intensity of his mortal body, he naturally didn't fear the high temperatures in the air. The black-armored guards outside the temple seemed to know who he was. No matter how Qinyu approached the temple, they didn't respond at all. As soon as he stepped into the temple, the temperature in the air began to rapidly fall. It was as if he had crossed over the scorching heat and midwinter. Faint traces of cold energy constantly drilled into his body like needles. Qinyu frowned. The ancient heart in his chest beat, shaking apart all the cold energy that invaded his body. Shwa, shwa. Several eyes gathered on Qinyu. As they saw that he hadn't stopped in the slightest and was able to resist the invasion of the cold energy, a dignified look appeared in their eyes. Master, they had all experienced the drastic changes in temperature both inside and outside the temple, so they naturally knew the mysteries behind it. To them, scorching heat and freezing cold weren't anything at all. But when the two changed, it was extremely difficult to contend with. To be able to resolve the temperature change without batting an eyelid, this alone was enough to cause everyone to look at Qin in a higher light. Of course, after the final selection, news of Qin and Dongfang Han's evenly matched battle had already spread out. No one dared to underestimate him, and now they only paid a little more attention to him. Qin thought of this. Since he couldn't keep a low profile, he might as well display a bit more strength to avoid anyone trying to find trouble with him. It was because of this that the moment he entered the temple and saw the people inside, he displayed such a performance just now. An alliance cultivator walked up and said in a low voice, "Mr. Qin, please wait a moment." Qin nodded. He walked into the temple and stood still. As the sound of footsteps echoed out from the temple entrance, once more, the gazes that were focused on Qin quickly dispersed, and they continued to observe the strength of those that came later. Luo, he was the last to arrive. Qin didn't glance at her, and she also didn't look at him. But both of them felt as if they were being watched by the other. The 10 people on the list had gathered. From within the temple, 4 alliance elders walked out, all of them with solemn expressions. The one in the lead said in a low voice, after entering the mystic realm, "Everyone must follow us. Without permission. You are not allowed to leave without permission. Otherwise you will have to bear the consequences." Without further delay, with a loud explosion, the entire temple violently trembled. Runes began to rapidly appear on the translucent surface of the temple. Rumble, rumble. Above the island, winds and clouds began to swirl. Massive black clouds appeared out of thin air, and the world suddenly darkened. At this time, a beam of light pierced through the black clouds and fell upon the temple, as if a formidable strength had been poured into it. All of the runes that appeared within the temple came to life. Hum, hum. Chapter 8:22. Far away from the Starfall archipelago, even further south, was the deep sea. Without the suppression of the Alliance array formation, the sea region became even more mysterious and terrifying. Raging waves soared into the skies. From time to time, one could see astonishingly large beasts rising from the seabed, breaking through the surface and roaring into the heavens. But in the depths of this terrifying sea region, there was a place that was incomparably calm. All of the turbulent undercurrents that approached would be directly erased. It was as if there was an invisible divine might shrouding this place, awe-inspiring and inviolable, breaking through the icy cold seawater and continuing downwards. It was like passing through a black curtain. Light was released from the seabed, illuminating everything. A stone altar stood atop the fine black sand of the seabed. It was extremely large, like the base of a city. One couldn't see the end of it. The reason it was described this way was because the altar was crudely constructed. It looked as if stones had been randomly moved here and piled up on top of each other. There were some strange runes on the surface of these stones. But far too much time had passed. Even with the protection of the altar, after being soaked in the endless seawater, these runes had long since become blurry and indistinct. One could only clearly feel the thick aura of time that these stones emitted, so thick that it nearly condensed into essence. But this aura didn't have the slightest smell of decay or decay. Rather, it was filled with a faint vitality. It was as if in the next moment these heavily worn stones would grow green shoots that would bloom and bear fruit. And the light coming from the seabed came from the altar. Or, to be more precise, it came from these seemingly ordinary stones. Beneath the illumination of the light, one could clearly see that around the deep-sea altar, there were countless sea monster beasts quietly crawling about. They came from different races and had different appearances and eating habits. A considerable portion of them were even recognized as natural enemies. As long as they met in the sea, there was no need for any reason, and a fierce battle would immediately break out. But now these sea monster beasts were all quietly lying in place, their tails facing backwards and their heads facing the altar. Most of their horrifying and ferocious faces actually revealed a hint of piety. Perhaps The only similarity between these demonic beasts was that their bodies were all very large. The smaller ones were hundreds of feet long, and the larger ones were more than 10,000 feet long, or even more astonishing. The simplest way to measure the strength of the sea monster beasts was their body size. Even if it wasn't 100% accurate, it was at least 90% accurate. If someone were to come here and see this scene, they would probably be confused and their eyeballs would pop out. Suddenly, a large amount of light gathered on the ancient and huge stone altar. They condensed on top of the altar and formed the outline of a huge eye. The stone altar was as large as the base of a city, but this eye took up almost 90% of its area. It was hard to imagine just how terrifying the body of the existence that possessed this eye was. The eyes condensed from light appeared. The monster beasts around the altar roared in unison and lowered their heads to the ground. The huge eyeball turned slightly, and then it looked past the monsters. Its gaze seemed to penetrate the barrier of the cold seawater, falling into the endless distance. Suddenly, a roar sounded from the bottom of the sea. With the altar as the center, the calm, deep sea went berserk without warning. The quiet seawater turned into violent beasts. They roared and spun wildly, forming a terrifying whirlpool at the bottom of the sea. Its volume rapidly expanded, sucking in more and more seawater, causing the whirlpool's energy to increase at an astonishing rate. Cheney swore that this was the worst transmission experience he had ever experienced in his life. If it weren't for the fact that his mortal body was powerful enough, it wouldn't have been as simple as his complexion turning pale. He would have vomited blood on the spot. His ears were filled with stifled coughs and great gasps for breath. The 4 Alliance elders were fine, but the other cultivators that were transmitted together were in a worse situation than Chi knew. One of them, a female cultivator in a plain white dress, had already begun to vomit. A pungent smell rose up, causing several people that were forcefully suppressing themselves to retch. The scene could be called spectacular. After all, it was extremely rare for a top beast trainer with a distinguished status to end up in such a distressed state. The 4 Alliance elders maintained their composure. They carefully observed everyone's reactions, and when they didn't discover anything wrong, they finally relaxed. In the final selection field, the top 100 participants entered the arena. In the end, only 87 people managed to leave alive, and 13 people would remain here forever. These 13 people's lives would undoubtedly bring new troubles to the Alliance that had just calmed down. But they still did this. Their goal was to confirm whether or not there was a spy sent by the sea on the final selection list. Before entering the mystic realm, when they stepped into the transmission hall, the temperature changed from hot to cold, as well as the fierce jolts of the transmission. All of this was to supplement and confirm the results of the screening. Once a participating cultivator revealed any problems, the 4 elders would immediately subdue them. Luckily, there weren't any problems. After waiting for a while for everyone to recover, one of the Alliance elders said, "The existence of the mystic realm is the foundation of the Alliance. The jolt you experienced just now is a way to confirm it, to prevent people with bad intentions from sneaking in. If someone could enter the list of 10, then in terms of pure beast trainer ability, they weren't necessarily weaker than them. Moreover, Luo He, Chinyu, and the others were all young. They were sure to have great achievements in the future. If they gave an appropriate explanation, they could avoid any dissatisfaction in their hearts. Why wouldn't they do something that didn't cost them anything?" Another elder smiled. "All right, if you've rested enough, then we should set off. Take a good look along the way. Perhaps there will be some harvests for you." The 3rd elder had a grim expression. "You can look and you can remember, but there is one thing you must remember. Whatever you see in the mystic realm cannot be revealed. Otherwise, once the Alliance learns of it, you will be severely punished." After stepping out of the hall, Qin Yu discovered that it looked exactly the same as the one he had seen before. Even the materials used were similar. The only difference was that the crystal used to construct this hall was a faint red color. The surface seemed to be covered in flames, and the air was cold. But soon, Qin Yu couldn't care about this anymore. This was because not too far away from the hall he saw a strange tree. The reason he said it was strange was because this tree's trunk and branches had long since withered away. One could even see the cracked bark underneath. The bare branches were like the claws of skeletons and monsters. They pointed straight towards the sky, and what was unbelievable was that these branches were actually covered with flowers. That's right, Qin Yu could confirm that these flowers grew from these withered branches. When the wind blew past, he could even smell a faint fragrance. It wasn't just Qin Yu who saw this strange tree. Everyone's eyes widened, their faces filled with disbelief. The elder who had reminded everyone to take a good look faintly smiled. Don't be surprised. The truly unbelievable things have yet to come. Thus, along the way, Qin Yu witnessed countless existences that completely subverted everything he knew. For instance, a burning river. It coiled above the earth like a giant fire dragon. The blazing flames emitted a scorching heat that twisted the air. But in this river, there were countless fish, happily swimming about as if they couldn't feel that it was burning. For instance, an active volcano that spewed out black smoke and a massive amount of dust. With a loud bang, it erupted. But what the volcano spewed out wasn't magma, but massive chunks of ice. These chunks of ice smashed into the ground, emitting an icy chill that caused a white frost to rapidly spread outwards with the falling ice as the center. For instance, a giant bird that flew through the skies. It had gorgeous feathers that reflected the sunlight with a rainbow-hued halo, as if it were carved from crystal. But when it lowered its head and looked at the group of cultivators walking on the ground, it revealed two empty eye sockets. One could clearly see the white bones within. Qin Yu even saw with his own eyes a giant meteor fall from the skies, dragging a long tail behind it. This meteor was massive. Even from a great distance, one could clearly feel the terrifying strength it carried. Qin Yu didn't doubt that as long as this meteor fell, it would be enough to turn the peaceful plain in front of him into a living hell. But he discovered that the four Alliance elders only glanced at it for a moment before looking away and continuing on their way. And beneath the meteor, the mountain goat and blue ox that were moving about on the plain didn't move at all. They maintained a lazy state of eating. The meteor fell to the ground. Qin Yu subconsciously narrowed his eyes. But the heaven-shaking explosion that he expected, as well as the world-destroying, might didn't erupt. It was like what he saw just now was only an illusion. But Qin Yu was certain that he hadn't seen wrong. That meteor that fell from the skies just now was absolutely real. Moreover, he noticed that everyone else around him had the same reaction as him. If it was an illusion, it was impossible for everyone to react the same way. As Qin Yu furrowed his eyebrows in contemplation, there was another loud explosion in the skies above. Then the meteor that had fallen to the ground just now appeared in his line of sight once more. It followed the exact same trajectory as before and smashed into the ground. The so-called Alliance mystic realm was filled with inconceivable possibilities. It was simply a place that caused one's heart to topple. Qin Yu had an intuition that this mystic realm was hiding some incomparably astonishing secret. And now, the place that the four Alliance elders were leading them to was likely related to this secret. At this moment, Qin Yu had unknowingly chosen to forget his primary goal for entering this mystic realm. His entire mind was focused on this secret. He wanted to approach it and understand it. Chapter 8:23. The jade pendant pierced the heavens. When one truly stood in front of it, all words paled in comparison. They could only stare with wide eyes, staring at the miraculous scene in front of them, their minds blanking out. It was like a waterfall falling from the highest heavens, rushing down to the earth. But in the next moment, it was frozen solid by a great strength, erasing all the shaking. The surface of the jade pendant was as smooth as a mirror, warm and transparent. The jade pendant shined with a faint halo of light. One couldn't see where it ended, and one couldn't see where it began. The four Alliance elders, whether they were gentle or cold, all had solemn and respectful expressions. There was no need to remind them. The cultivators on a list of 10, including Chinyu, felt endless awe rise up in their hearts. It was like this jade pendant was a god. Just standing in front of it made one feel a sense of blasphemy, making one feel apprehensive and panic-stricken. Everyone, I ask you to step in front of the jade pendant according to your ranking. Tell us what you feel, truthfully. I apologize, but the Alliance cannot tell you what this jade pendant is for now. But please believe that this will be the greatest lucky chance you will encounter in your lives. So, everyone, please do your best and do not hold anything back. I guarantee that if you hide anything, you will regret it in the future. First, Luo He. The four Alliance elders spread out, their expressions dignified. Luo He took a deep breath and walked towards the jade pendant. After several steps, he stopped. He didn't know what was happening, but he simply closed his eyes. Silence reigned. The four Alliance elders' eyes fell tightly on him. Although at this moment, Qin Yu's mind was completely focused on the jade pendant in front of him, he could still feel a trace of vigilance from them. That's right, vigilance. It was as if they were worried that Luo He would suddenly attack and harm the jade pendant. But at this time, Qin Yu's ability to think was suppressed by his instincts. He didn't think about what was happening. He tossed aside his thoughts and looked at the sky-piercing jade pendant in front of him, as if it contained everything he wanted. After a moment, Luo He opened his eyes. He stared at the sky-piercing jade pendant in front of him, a bit of hesitation flashing on his face. Then he stepped forwards once more. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps. Luo He suddenly stopped. He seemed to be forcefully suppressing something, but in the end he couldn't. His complexion paled. He turned and spat out a mouthful of blood. His entire body was wrapped in a strength and sent flying backwards. Puff! After landing on the ground, she spat out another mouthful of blood. Luo He looked at Yubai, her eyes filled with shock. An undetectable disappointment appeared in the eyes of the four Alliance elders, but they immediately calmed down. One of them walked to Luo He's side and helped him suppress his injuries. Then, in a low voice, he asked Luo He about his harvest from the jade disc. At this moment, the second person on the list of 10 started to walk towards the jade disc. Qin Yu suddenly felt a bit of regret. He shouldn't have hidden his strength and only obtained 6th place. Otherwise, he would already be standing in front of the jade disc. Although he knew very well that it was just a matter of time before he could get close to the jade annulus, he still couldn't help but regret it. This emotion was extremely strong, so strong that it almost destroyed his rationality. With Qin Yu's thoughts and shrewdness, this was certainly abnormal, but at this time he couldn't sense it at all. It was as if when this jade appeared in front of him, all reason and thinking would be completely destroyed, and his entire mind would be occupied. The second person on the name list was sent back while coughing up blood. He was in an even worse state than Luo He. He didn't even have the chance to continue forward before he was injured by a formless energy. Then came the third and the fourth. Qin Yu sucked in great gulps of air, barely able to suppress the impatience in his heart. This period of time clearly hadn't been long, but in his eyes it had become incomparably long. Finally, the fifth person failed. Yes, he failed. Although he didn't know what he would experience after approaching the jade disc. He was sent back while coughing up blood. In addition to the expressions of the four Alliance elders, it was clear that he hadn't reached his goal. Now it was Qin Yu's turn. Without waiting for the Alliance elders to signal him, he strode forwards. If it weren't for his instincts telling him not to approach too quickly, he feared he would have flown over. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps, 7 steps, 8 steps, 9 steps, 13 steps, 14 steps, 15 steps. The originally expressionless Alliance elders who had been disappointed with the results of this competition suddenly brightened up. An unexpected dark horse. Was he hiding his strength? Or did he have a tolerance that surpassed ordinary people when facing the jade disc? But this wasn't important. What was important was that there might be a chance, even if this chance was extremely slim. So slim that the Alliance had spent tens of thousands of years and still hadn't grasped it. But as long as it existed, they would continue to persist and never give up. The 16th step. Qin Yu felt that he had reached his limit. At this time, the surrounding air was like a viscous swamp, desperately wrapping around him as if it wanted to grind him into powder. It was like an open maw filled with fangs, able to tear him apart with just a gentle closing. Within his chest, 2 hearts wildly beat, as he felt a burning sensation in his lungs. Qin Yu determined that he couldn't continue forwards any further. He let out a heavy breath and looked at the jade disc in front of him with a bit of unwillingness. He was already very close to it, only a few steps away. But these few steps were an insurmountable gap. Hum! A loud sound arrived without warning, rumbling into his mind and reaching deep into his soul. Qin Yu closed his eyes. He could feel his consciousness being drawn out of his body and arriving in a strange and dazzling world. Starfall Archipelago, Beast Trainer Alliance Headquarters. President Beach Douglas opened his eyes. His expression was calm, and he naturally exuded the calmness that a leader should have. However, the 3 vice presidents who had known each other for many years could still sense the seriousness hidden under his calm face in an instant. Sir President, that restless feeling hasn't disappeared yet? A vice president asked in a low voice. Douglas slowly nodded. Yes, not only has it not disappeared, but it has become even more intense. He paused for a moment and swept his eyes over the 3 people. Everyone, my intuition tells me that a great change is about to arrive in the Alliance. The 3 vice presidents felt their hearts turn cold. Because of his alien bloodline, President Douglas possessed an intuition that far surpassed the imagination of the common man. And over the endless years, this intuition had mostly come true. Another vice president had an ugly complexion. Could it be that the great sea beast attacking the ship is really going to take action? We have already conducted the most stringent screening. For this, we didn't even hesitate to pay the lives of 13 outstanding beast trainers. Moreover, during the transmission, there were 2 other auxiliary tests, and there were no problems at all. Could it be that we haven't done enough? The final 10 people have already entered the mystic realm. With 4 Alliance elders nearby, any abnormality will be immediately detected. Even if that sea beast wants to make a big move, I fear it won't have the chance. After all, the mystic realm is completely different from the world we live in. Biggie Douglas remained silent. He was well aware of what the 3 vice presidents were saying, but he still couldn't erase the haze in his heart. However, there was one thing that was correct. The rules of the mystic realm were different from those of the main world. Unless one reached an existence that truly transcended the rules, it was impossible to send their strength into the mystic realm. He hoped that nothing would happen. In fact, as the 4 vice presidents of the Alliance were worrying, another strength had crossed through the endless space and time to arrive. What it wanted to do was break into the mystic realm. The source of this strength came from the little blue lamp. When Qin Yu stepped into the Alliance mystic realm, the little blue lamp had already sensed him through their connection. It was shocked beyond belief. At the level of the little blue lamp, it hadn't been so shocked even when Qin Yu touched upon the path of time. It was really, even in the eyes of the little blue lamp, this fortuitous encounter was filled with fantastical colors and inconceivable colors. When Qin Yu arrived in front of the jade disc, there was no longer any suspense. Although he couldn't figure out what was going on, the facts were right in front of him. He didn't have time to think about why this thing was here. After determining the identity of the jade disc, the little blue lamp only had one thought: obtain it. It had to help Qin Yu obtain it. Even if it was discovered by the heavenly Tao, it wouldn't hesitate. Thus, the little blue lamp attacked without reservation. It wasn't just because it was determined to obtain it, but also because the rules of the world it existed in had already changed. If it tried to forcefully break in without permission, the consumption would be shockingly high. It had to go all out. In front of the sky-piercing jade disk, as the 4 Alliance elders looked at Chinyu, who had his eyes closed, their eyes became increasingly bright. This was because they discovered that not only was Chinyu closer to the jade disk, but the time he persisted had far surpassed Luohi. In fact, it wasn't much different from the best results recorded in the past. Although this didn't mean that they would definitely obtain a harvest. At the very least, the chances were much higher. Suddenly, in the skies above the jade disk, there was a loud explosion. This wasn't the roar of thunder, but more like a towering mountain crashing to the ground. Then, the skies shattered and a beam of starlight fell down. It condensed into a beam of light that covered Chinyu. Motes of starlight floated up and down, spinning like a rainbow galaxy. They emitted an endless and mysterious aura, making Chinyu seem like an immortal descending to the world. His robes fluttered in the wind. Then he floated up from the ground, rising 1,000 feet into the air. Hum! Hum! A faint tremor spread out from the ground. Everyone's eyes widened, their faces filled with shock. This was because they could clearly feel that the source of this tremor was the sky-piercing jade disk in front of them. It was like there was some sort of resonance between it and the starlight that fell from the skies. The 4 Alliance elders flushed red with excitement. They swore that, in the annals of history, this was a scene that had never appeared before. This was the first time that the jade disk had responded to an outside exploration. Perhaps the person that the entire Alliance had been waiting for had finally appeared today. Luohi paled. She stared at Chinyu's back. After a brief moment of shock and disbelief, she revealed a deep hatred. Chinyu, it's you again. Why is it that every time you ruin my plans? Moreover, why is this damned jade disk resonating with you? Her eyes darkened for a long time before finally turning cold. I will not allow you to succeed in front of me. This time, it is my turn to destroy your good fortune so that you will regret it for the rest of your life. Luohi lowered her head. At this moment, because of the changes in the jade disk, no one noticed that the shadow beneath her feet had changed. Like a drop of ink falling into clear water, a black shadow constantly spread outwards. They had failed. Chinyu and the little blue lamp's consciousness fell into silence. Their hearts were filled with unwillingness, but there was nothing they could do. This was its choice, and in this world, no one could force it to do anything it didn't want to do. The starlight that fell from the skies was its compensation to Chinyu. It could be considered a consolation reward for being rejected. But even if it was only a consolation reward, Chinyu was still shaken as he felt the strength constantly flowing into his body from the starlight. He couldn't help but think, if he could truly obtain its approval with the little blue lamp's help, just what sort of harvest would there be? He feared that it would be an astonishing amount of wealth, one that was simply unimaginable. Perhaps he should try again. What if he succeeded? Just as this thought rose, it was suppressed by the little blue lamp's words. Don't waste your energy. Since it has rejected you, it won't give you a second chance. After enduring and enduring, the little blue lamp let out a heavy sigh. He had no idea what sort of heaven-defying luck he had stumbled upon to arrive in front of it, but in the end he could only give up. How could he be willing? But even if he was unwilling, there was nothing he could do. If he exchanged for a stroke of good fortune, the little blue lamp might be able to think of some other method. But facing it, it was best not to use any methods. Otherwise, the one to regret it in the end would be himself. Of this, the little blue lamp firmly believed. Chinyu clenched his teeth. Is there really no chance? Perhaps you can tell me the origin of this jade disk, and we can think of a way together. The little blue lamp said, if you have the qualifications to know about it, then you will naturally know. If you don't have the qualifications, then even if I say it, you won't be able to hear it. Give up. You are not fated with it. It will continue to stay here, waiting for the person it is waiting for. Qin Yu's complexion paled, but he believed in the little blue lamp. Since it said this, it was best not to be greedy. At this time there was a loud explosion. Immersed in the world of consciousness, Qin Yu didn't know what was happening, but he could clearly feel that the formidable strength from the starlight was rapidly weakening until it disappeared from sight. The little blue lamp's consciousness projection suddenly had a strange expression. It deeply looked at Qin Yu and said, "There is a change in the outside world. You must leave immediately. The gift of the stars has been interrupted. For you, it is hard to say whether this is a good or bad thing." Qin Yu's eyes brightened. "What is the meaning of this? Tell me." The little blue lamp said, "The consolation prize was destroyed by someone. In a strict sense, you haven't been completely rejected. That's right, it is just as you thought. Perhaps after this, you will have another chance to try. But for now, you had best leave this place. Otherwise, I fear there will be some trouble." In front of the jade disc, the shadows that spread out on the ground began to wildly spin, as if they were the projection of a giant vortex. Then, with a loud roar, countless phantoms of giant beasts drilled out. Their bodies were thousands of feet long, some even tens of thousands of feet, and they crazily rushed towards the jade disc. Chapter 824. Qin Yu opened his eyes. Before he could fully control his body, his mortal body's powerful instincts had already begun to respond in the face of danger. Qin Yu stepped forwards. His body howled like a rock as he avoided the jaws of a giant beast phantom. As for what happened next, he didn't need to worry about it. The 4 Alliance elders rushed in front of him at nearly the same time. Without hesitation, they moved in front of Qin Yu to protect him. "Hurry and leave!" The entire Alliance had waited for 100,000 years. Finally, a person that could cause the jade disc to respond had arrived. It wouldn't allow any harm to come to him. Bang, bang. The 4 Alliance elders unleashed their full cultivation. Boundless auras burst out of their bodies and intertwined with each other. It was like a giant millstone, rumbling as it rotated, blocking all of the giant beast phantoms outside. Qin Yu's thoughts stirred as he guessed the reason. He certainly wouldn't explain too much. Taking advantage of the time the 4 Alliance elders attacked, he landed on the ground and left the range of the battlefield. Raising his head and looking forward, as if sensing the threat from the outside world, a faint layer of light appeared on the surface of the mirror-like supreme jade wall. It was thin and light, like the vast, clear starry sky, with the light of billions of stars sprinkling down. Roar! Another roar sounded out from the shadow vortex on the ground. Qin Yu's heart shrank as if someone had ruthlessly stabbed him between his eyebrows. He turned his head to see a giant shadow tentacle drill out from the vortex, ruthlessly lashing out like a whip. Rumble, rumble. Wherever it passed, the air emitted hoarse roars. Several giant beast phantoms weren't able to dodge in time and were directly smashed to pieces, tumbling around and vanishing from sight. The 4 Alliance elders clearly knew just how fierce this attack was. Their complexions changed and they hurriedly retreated. The shadow tentacle crashed into the jade disc like a bolt of lightning. There was a heaven-shaking explosion as a terrifying shockwave swept out. Qin Yu never imagined that he would be affected even though he had already escaped the range of the battlefield. He cursed inwardly. He only had enough time to raise his arms in front of him, but in the next moment he was sent flying away as if he had been struck by a giant hammer. He tumbled to the ground several times and continued to draw backwards. He shook his sore and aching arms, his heart shaking. After fusing with the ancient's heart, his mortal body had constantly transformed and strengthened. He had also obtained the gift of starlight, allowing his mortal body to rapidly strengthen for a short period of time. Even so, he was only barely able to resist the onslaught. If the impact had been a little stronger, or if he had been a little closer, his bones would have been broken and his head would have been bleeding. Painful groans could be heard all around. Not long ago, The 10 cultivators who had entered the mystic realm were filled with anticipation and excitement. But now, most of them were lying on the ground, curled up and moaning in a low voice. Qin Yu frowned. He couldn't find Luo He anywhere. Where did she go? Of course. Qin Yu didn't think that he had already been killed by the phantom beast that had escaped from the shadow vortex. Perhaps, even if most of the people here died, nothing would happen to him. In fact, Qin Yu couldn't help but suspect that the sudden appearance of the shadow vortex had something to do with the Luo River. At this time, another roar came from the shadow vortex. Qin Yu's pupils violently shrank. As he saw 7 or 8 tentacles drill out, there was only one thought in his mind. He absolutely could not stay here any longer. What nonsense! Just a single tentacle had nearly crippled his arms in the aftermath of the collision with the jade pendant, and now there were so many of them. If he continued to stay here, wouldn't he just be ruthlessly rubbed against the ground? Without hesitation, Qin Yu turned and quickly left. He was indeed thinking about obtaining the jade pendant's approval once more. But no matter how great the benefits were, he still had to ensure that he was alive. If he died, everything would be for naught. In any case, the jade pendant was here. He might as well wait until the battle was over before coming back. As for whether or not the jade pendant would be destroyed by the tentacles that drilled out of the shadow vortex, Qin Yu wasn't worried at all. If the little blue lamp was so excited that it didn't even hesitate to expose itself to help him obtain something, how could it be so easily destroyed? Even if there was something hidden in the shadow vortex, since the little blue lamp didn't say anything, there was nothing to worry about. You're right. The jade pendant won't be destroyed. Even if the entire world was destroyed, it would still be safe and sound. The little blue lamp's consciousness fluctuated. However, the existence that created the shadow vortex isn't ordinary. If it weren't for the fact that this space is a bit strange, it would be able to erupt with a strength 10 times greater than it is now. As Qin Yu rapidly left the battlefield, he asked, "You can't tell me the origin of the jade pendant, but can you at least tell me what the shadow vortex is?" The little blue lamp was silent for a moment, as if it felt that it should tell Qin Yu some things so that he was mentally prepared. After all, he still had a chance to obtain its approval. Although the chances weren't too high, what if he succeeded? After several breaths of time, the little blue lamp slowly said, "You should have already discovered that there is something strange about this space. The reason it is like this is because this space itself shouldn't have existed. This isn't too accurate. To be more accurate, after it was formed, it should have immediately collapsed." Qin Yu's eyes brightened. "You mean to say that the reason this space can continue to exist is because of the heaven-reaching jade pendant?" "That's right," the little blue lamp lightly said. "It suppressed the collapse of this space and reshaped its rules and order. In a sense, you can think of this space as an independent small world. However, there is something you need to understand. This space that should have collapsed has evolved into a stable small world. This doesn't just mean that the jade pendant has suppressed this place. It also means that it has suppressed the will of the main world itself." Qin Yu's eyes widened. The little blue lamp continued to say, "That's right. You should have already guessed that the existence of the jade pendant is suppressing the source, will of a world." Qin Yu sucked in a breath of cold air. Although he had guessed that the jade pendant was extraordinary from the little blue lamp's reaction, as well as the gift of the stars, it was only now that he drew an approximate outline of it in his heart. Although he still didn't know what the origin of the jade pendant was and how miraculous it was already grand and powerful enough. Suppressing the source will of a world, Qin Yu didn't know what level of strength was required to accomplish this, but it far surpassed the limits of his understanding. What should have been destroyed wasn't destroyed. Rather, it continued to exist for a long time. The world source was suppressed, so it couldn't directly destroy this place, but its instincts urged it to adapt to other methods. Thus, under the guidance of the world's will, an existence that created the shadow vortex was born. In simpler terms, you can think of the thing hidden in the vortex as the incarnation of the world source. Qin Yu remained silent. No wonder the shock waves from that collision just now were so terrifying. It turned out that the two sides that fought were masters that he didn't even dare to imagine. But just as this thought appeared, the little blue lamp poured a bucket of cold water over it. It quietly said, "In that collision just now, whether it was the shadow vortex or the jade pendant, neither of them were able to erupt with even 1% of their strength. Otherwise, you would have already been crushed to pieces." All right, he had been thoroughly looked down upon, but the little blue lamp's vision ensured that it wasn't exaggerating at all. For Qin Yu to be able to reach his current height and stand out amongst countless cultivators, he had a heart of awe towards the world of cultivation and had also built up the confidence he needed. But this time, he suddenly lost all confidence. Perhaps his performance could be called extraordinary, but looking at the myriad heavens, there were countless people that could compare with him or even surpass him. Could he really obtain the jade pendant's approval? If he missed out on this lucky chance, then even if his heart was as broad as the sea, he would still regret it for the rest of his life. As if sensing Qin Yu's thoughts, the little blue lamp was silent for a moment. It said, "Qin Yu, you do not need to belittle yourself. In this world, it is true that there are countless existences that surpass you in terms of talent and performance. But for you to appear in front of the jade pendant, that is your lucky chance. Just based on this point alone, you have surpassed them countless times over. This is because, at the very least, you have the chance to obtain its approval, and those people will never have this chance in their entire lives. Moreover, you originally failed. It was the shadow vortex that interrupted the gift of the stars, thus giving you another chance. This was originally earned, so what does it matter if you fail?" Qin Yu took a deep breath. After a long time, he slowly exhaled. "You're right." He paused for a moment, his eyes becoming increasingly bright. "But for something like a consolation prize, taking it once is enough. I still want to try. There might be a chance at all." That was right. To be able to arrive in front of the heaven-piercing jade pendant was already a heaven-defying lucky chance. Out of the trillions of lives in this world, how many people could obtain it? For instance, the other cultivators that entered the mystic realm with him, and even the 4 alliance elders, none of them knew what sort of lucky chance was placed in front of them, let alone trying to obtain the jade pendant's approval. He was already lucky enough, so how could he be greedier? He would do his best so that he wouldn't have any regrets. The little blue lamp was surprised by Qin Yu's performance. Then it revealed a bit of appreciation. For him to be able to walk out of his trough so quickly and adjust his state of mind was commendable. It didn't speak much about this matter. Instead, it changed the topic. "What do you plan on doing now? Do you want to find a place and wait for the war to end?" Qin Yu shook his head. "No, I want to take advantage of this chance to look for something first." He briefly explained his search for the ice soul jade bed. The little blue lamp was silent for a moment. Then it said, "I don't know what the ice soul jade bed you speak of looks like, but I can sense that there just happens to be one in this direction that contains an extremely cold object." Qin Yu looked in the direction that the little blue lamp pointed in. There was a winding mountain range. The surface of the mountain was steep and covered with withered trees that looked like bony claws. Their dry branches were actually covered with heavy fruits. He revealed a puzzled expression. The little blue lamp continued to say, "It's inside the mountain." The mountain range didn't seem too far away, but the distance was actually astonishing. After flying for some time, Qin Yu landed. He looked up at the stone wall in front of him and discovered traces of man-made excavation. As he thought about the news that Sky Declaring Pavilion had obtained that the Ice Soul Jade bed had been used as a burial object by some Alliance elder, he revealed a surprised expression. Chapter 8:25. It was indeed a great tomb. 2 huge stone statues stood at the entrance of the tomb. One of them was a 3-headed hellhound, and the other was a green-faced Yiksha with fangs and a long spear in its hand. Both of them looked ferocious and intimidating. But now, these two statues had been destroyed and turned into broken stones. The tomb door was wide open, and the sunken footprints on its surface were particularly clear. This was clearly an unwelcome guest who had entered without an invitation. Looking at the footprints and feeling the residual fluctuations in the air, Qin Yu's complexion became strange. A thought popped up in his mind once more. It couldn't be such a coincidence, right? After a moment of silence, Qin Yu's feet moved and he floated upwards. Like a shadow, he quietly flew into the tomb door. What he saw along the way proved that the master of the great tomb was an extremely cautious person. Even though the tomb was built in the Alliance's mystic realm, there were still layers upon layers of mechanisms and traps set up. Of course, these mechanisms and traps had all been scrapped. If it weren't for this, it wouldn't have been easy for Qin Yu to enter. Here, he solemnly thanked the pioneer who opened the way. After avoiding two small mechanisms that hadn't been triggered, Qin Yu smoothly reached the depths of the great tomb. He was cautious and cautious, afraid that he would make a sound and be discovered by the pioneer. But in the end, he discovered that this caution was useless. The entire great tomb was empty without a single person in sight. The only good news was that Qin Yu had found the ice soul jade bed. It was placed where the coffin should have been. Qin Yu carefully swept out with his divine sense. After making sure that he hadn't missed anything, he revealed a puzzled expression. Whether or not the person who broke in was the one he thought they were, that person had spent so much effort to come here and hadn't touched anything at all. A day trip into the tomb? Please, how could a normal person be so bored? As his thoughts raced, Qin Yu arrived beside the ice soul jade bed. It looked like a giant bed carved from a giant block of ice. Besides being a little more exquisite and gorgeous, there wasn't anything special about it. The ice wasn't completely transparent. Qin Yu looked at it several times and suddenly gasped. He leaned over and found that there was a coffin within the ice soul jade bed. He frowned and looked around. There weren't any signs of damage at all. Then, how did the master of this tomb place his coffin inside? At this time, the little blue lamp suddenly said, "How interesting." The entrance was actually designed in such an ingenious manner. The master of this tomb must have put a great deal of thought into it. Qin Yu asked, "What did you discover?" The little blue lamp said, "The coffin in the ice is a hidden space node. Through it, you can enter another overlapping space. If you want to enter, you will need to shatter the ice soul jade bed." Qin Yu hesitated. It wasn't that he didn't want to part with the treasure, but that it was used to save the chicken overlord. If it was destroyed, the little blue lamp said, "Have you forgotten how wonderful this mystic realm is? Don't worry, it will quickly reassemble and recover." Right? I almost didn't think of that. Qin Yu smiled. He suddenly realized where the vanguard had gone. It was clear that this person knew the secret of the spatial node and had already entered the overlapping space. Thus there was no one here. Xiao Chen raised his hand and punched. The ice soul jade bed did not move at all, but the surging energy surging out was like a great river. Ka-cha! Ka-cha! In an instant, countless cracks appeared and rapidly spread outwards. Qin Yu drew back his hand. The ice soul jade bed shattered to the ground, revealing the coffin that lingered with cold energy. Without the obstruction of the ice, it was completely exposed. The entire surface of the coffin didn't have any patterns or decorations. It was covered in a thick black color that exuded a dignified and infernal energy. What do we do now? Simple. Push it open and lie down. Qin Yu, entering the coffin, didn't seem auspicious at all. But since he had already started, there was no reason for him to give up halfway. Moreover, he also wanted to know what goal this vanguard had in rushing in. Why did the master of this tomb arrange such a complex array? Before he could touch the coffin, the little blue lamp suddenly said, "Wait, if you attack like this, there will be a major problem. Now, follow the information I gave you and strike the surface of the coffin. Remember, don't make any mistakes. Otherwise, we will be in trouble. Okay. Qin Yu nodded. A fluctuation of consciousness entered his mind. He hesitated for a moment and then suddenly attacked. His movements were as fast as lightning, and he struck the surface of the coffin 36 times. Each time he struck a different place, covering nearly the entire surface of the coffin. The moment the 36th strike landed, Qin Yu retreated back to his original position. There was a loud cracking sound from the coffin, and then the coffin lid quietly opened, revealing a pitch-black crack. Qin Yu didn't step forward. He continued to stand where he was, as if he were waiting for something. At this time, a white bone hand suddenly shot out from the coffin. It grabbed the edge of the coffin and slowly pulled it open. Then, a corpse wearing a gorgeous robe and with all its flesh and blood rotting away. All that was left over was a skeleton. It sat up from the coffin and looked at Qin Yu with its empty eye sockets. Its mouth opened and closed, emitting a stiff and mechanical voice. "Why did you come again?" Qin Yu didn't know how to answer. He thought for a moment and remained silent. Luckily, the skeleton said, "Come in." It lay back down in the coffin and moved to the side, leaving a spot open for Qin Yu. Qin Yu's complexion was cloudy and uncertain, but after waiting for a moment, the little blue lamp didn't say anything. He clenched his teeth and stepped inside. "Don't resist." The little blue lamp's voice sounded out in his mind. In the next moment, the skeleton hugged Qin Yu tightly. The coffin lid quickly closed, and everything in front of him fell into darkness. Unexpectedly, as he fell into darkness, the feeling that the skeleton gave Qin Yu suddenly changed. It was gentle and full of elasticity. After a moment of hesitation, he moved his palm and touched it. It was warm and smooth to the touch. There was a light hum in his ears, and a hot and warm breath fell upon his ears. What the hell? This was clearly the horrifying plot of a skeleton in a coffin. So how did it suddenly turn into a sweet temptation in the darkness? Qin Yu wasn't moved at all. Rather, he felt even more horrified. If it weren't for the little blue lamp's reminder, he would have never been able to stop himself from attacking. A fragrant and sweet taste with a hint of coolness continuously drilled into his nose. Qin Yu frowned. His heart uncontrollably began to beat faster. A wave of heat flowed through his limbs and quickly spread to every inch of his body. It was as if an invisible flame had been ignited in his body. It seemed to be able to burn a person's rationality into ashes, leaving only instinct and desire. "Since you've come, why must you leave? Isn't it a better choice to stay here and accompany me?" A slightly hoarse voice rang in her ears. "Answer me. Do you choose me, or do you want to leave? Why aren't you speaking? Are you worried that if you open your mouth, you won't be able to help but want to stay? If you remain silent like this, then I will take it as you tacitly agree. Do you really want to leave? Why? Is it because I'm not beautiful enough? But you haven't truly seen me yet. Can you give me a chance to prove myself?" The flames within his body burned hotter and hotter. Qin, you could clearly hear his heart pounding like a drum. His body began to heat up, but when he opened his eyes, they were indifferent, like calm water beneath ice, without the slightest fluctuation. "Stay, stay. Why aren't you speaking? Speak. I hate your silence. I want you to stay. Stay with me." The woman's voice became shrill and grating. She used more and more strength in the darkness, crazily holding onto Qin Yu. The warm and soft feeling soon became binding. She was like a rope, desperately trying to squeeze into Qin Yu's flesh and blood. But in the face of all of this, he was like a block of wood. Whether it was the temptation from before or the madness of tearing apart all pretenses, he didn't respond at all. He was like a passerby watching from the sidelines. After an unknown period of time, a woman's unwilling scream resounded in Qin Yu's ears. The little blue lamp lightly said, "We've arrived." Shwa! Qin Yu opened his eyes. He was peacefully lying in the coffin. Besides him, There was only darkness, so dark that he couldn't even see his own fingers. Vaguely, he could feel a pair of eyes filled with unwillingness staring at him from the darkness. Frowning, Qin Yu closed his eyes once more. The feeling of being stared at was immediately blocked out. Bang! There was movement outside. Luo he stood in the great tomb. The environment here was actually almost identical to another space. The only difference was that there was a black stone chair here. Now, the figure sitting on the stone chair was being held in midair by an invisible force. His widened eyes were filled with shock and anger. Impossible. In this space, you can actually use a strength stronger than mine. Yun Yueming struggled with all his might, but it was all in vain. Luo he crossed her hands behind her back, her eyes icy cold. In this world, there is nothing that is impossible. But I really must thank you. If it weren't for you being too selfish as an elder of the Alliance and placing your hopes on resurrection after death, how could I have locked onto it? Yun Yueming's eyes widened. Who are you? Just who are you? Luo he lightly said, You're just a lonely ghost that died long ago and still refuses to return to the dust of the earth. Why would you need to know so much? In order to express my thanks to you, I will act quickly so that you won't feel too much pain. Ah! Yin Yueming miserably cried out. His soul began to burn. Within the gray flames, his soul body rapidly melted away. But as this happened, the phantom of a fetus egg appeared. It was extremely thin and dim, as if it were formed from interweaving smoke. It seemed as if a single breath could scatter it away. Luo He's eyes brightened. Her face flushed red with excitement. She stared at the fetus egg phantom in front of her, as if she could see the future and hope within it. This was indeed his last chance. If he succeeded, all the trials and tribulations he had experienced would turn into smoke. He would return with a new appearance and a greater strength. If he failed, then he would be beyond redemption. Everything would be over. I will not fail. I cannot fail. She looked up, her eyes locking onto the fetus egg phantom. Luo, he slowly reached out a hand. Her movements were slow, as if she were worried that if she moved just a little bit more, the phantom would scatter. Her 5 fingers opened and grasped forwards. Then she stuffily coughed, and all the blood drained from her face. At the same time, the lines on her palm began to rapidly turn black. It was like a black river was gathering at the center, forming a pitch-black hole that couldn't be seen. Sensing the aura of the fetus egg, the edges of the black hole wriggled and expanded, finally swallowing up the flesh and blood of her palm. The remaining 5 fingers were also invaded by the darkness, turning a hard metallic color. It was like 5 iron nails had been inserted into space, holding the black hole in place. In the next moment, the black hole spat out black rays of light that wove together into a net that covered the fetus egg phantom. Thump! Thump! Lying in the pitch-black coffin, Qin, you could clearly hear the beating that occurred every once in a while. It was deep and heavy, like the sun and moon were hammers that shook the entire world, emitting a powerful will that suppressed all. Because of the little blue lamp, even though Qin Yu was here, he could clearly see what was happening outside. He had seen the entire process of Luo he killing Yun Mingyue. He had also seen the black hole appear on his palm and imprison the fetus egg. It really was him. As time passed, the black light wove together into a net. The fetus egg phantom became increasingly clear, as if it were gradually materializing from a shadow, and the beating he heard just now had come from the fetus egg. Moreover, as it continued to solidify, it became increasingly clear. It's the will from the shadow vortex. The little blue lamp said, My estimates were a bit off. I don't know why the heaven-piercing jade annulus that descended into this space has to have some problem. Otherwise, with its strength, even if it is the strength of the world source, it would still be impossible to forcefully summon it through a projection. Qin Yu frowned. What should we do? The little blue lamp said, Stop him. After a brief pause, it repeated itself, its voice becoming increasingly firm. "We must stop him." Chinyu said, "Are you confident?" If it was just Luohi alone, he wouldn't fear her. But now, what had descended upon him was the strength of the shadow vortex's will. To be more accurate, this strength came from the world source will. The little blue lamp said, "No, but we have to give it a try, even if there is only a 10% chance of success." It seemed to take a deep breath. "You definitely can't understand why I have suddenly become so radical. But, to tell you the truth, we have no other choice right now. Without accident, it will be forcefully summoned and destroyed by the shadow vortex's will. If we witness all of this and stay out of it, believe me, even if we can leave today, our future will be cursed, and we will fall into eternal silence." Chinyu, what did the heaven-piercing jade annulus have to do with the fetus egg? What was its origin? If they encountered it, they couldn't even avoid it. They had to risk their lives to help it. There is actually such an overbearing existence in this world. Restrain your thoughts and don't waste your mind. We really need to go all out. The little blue lamp's tone was particularly calm, but from this calmness, one could clearly feel the decisiveness of throwing everything aside. "In a moment, I will mobilize all of my strength to resist the shadow vortex's will. What you need to do is kill this person in the shortest time possible. As long as he dies and loses the medium, the shadow vortexes will have no choice but to retreat. Believe me, although this battle has great risks, there is also a chance it will bring unexpected harvests. Chinyu, I have a premonition that whether or not you can obtain its approval will depend on this moment." The little blue lamp no longer spoke, but Chinyu could feel a terrifying strength constantly gathering in the darkness, crossing through space and time. At this moment, the feeling that the little blue lamp gave him was like a true sun hanging in the heavens. It was vast and boundless, impossible to resist. It could burn all to ashes and turn them to powder. It really was going all out. Chinyu was well aware that the little blue lamp was prepared to go all out. Even if it failed today, there was a high chance it would survive. Perhaps it would fall into a long slumber until someone else found it. But if it failed, it would surely die, and it would die in an extremely ugly manner. If it didn't want to die, then it was time to go all out. Chinyu closed his eyes, silently waiting. Within the net of interweaving black light, the embryo egg finally condensed. At this time, with a loud explosion, the entire underground tomb sunk down dozens of feet. The smooth stone slabs laid on the ground began to crack like a spider web. The cracks even spread to the main body of the tomb palace, as if a giant mouth were crying out in pain. An invisible attraction was released from the embryo egg, as if it were the amalgamation of all that was beautiful in the world. Just by looking at it, one would feel a desire to occupy it without a care for anything else. Luohi's breathing became heavy, and the blood vessels in his eyes rapidly filled with blood. In the blink of an eye, his eyes turned crimson. He took a step forwards. A fluctuation suddenly came from the black hole in his palm, causing him to awaken. His forehead was covered with a cold sweat. In that moment just now, he had a desperate impulse to protect the embryo egg from harm. If it weren't for that person's strength, Luo, was well aware that he would have already become a puppet being controlled. What a terrifying embryo egg! Luohi's pupils shrank, revealing a deep fear and dread. He didn't dare to look at it any longer. He closed his eyes and grasped forwards. Bang! The black hole rapidly grew. The net of black light that covered the embryo egg contracted, slowly pulling it over. The entire process was extremely slow. Even the black light that formed the net constantly collapsed and reformed. It was clear that this seemingly simple act of dragging the embryo egg would cause an incomparably astonishing loss of strength. Chinyu suppressed his impulse. He had already guessed what the little blue lamp was thinking. First, he would have the shadow vortex consume some of its strength to increase his chances of victory. Even if the chances were small in the face of life or death, he had to strive for it with everything he had. The embryo egg drew closer and closer to the black hole. Faintly, He could hear excited roars coming from the black hole. Now, the little blue lamp roared. Qin Yu's eyes flashed open, and a powerful aura broke out from his body. Bang! The coffin lid was lifted off, and he rushed forwards. Without hesitation, he punched out his fist. Qin Yu used his full strength in this punch. It also detonated all of the strength that the little blue lamp had gathered. In a battle of life or death, there was no room for concealment. This punch had caught him off guard and also happened when his opponent was relaxed. He had to obtain the greatest result possible. Bang! There was a heaven-shaking explosion. The black hole was violently bombarded. The edges violently trembled, and the swallowing strength it released stagnated. In the next moment, the net that wrapped around the embryo egg began to collapse. Hum! Light flashed on the surface of the embryo egg. It was like a shining star, turning into a sweeping impact that tore apart the net. Roar! An angry roar echoed out from the vortex. Although it was pitch black inside, Qin Yu could still feel the eyes locked onto him. It was like an invisible mountain had arrived, able to suppress the highest heavens and 10th earth. Luckily, this feeling only lasted for a moment before it was blocked by the little blue lamp. Otherwise, Qin Yu feared his mind would have been crushed to pieces. Qin Yu. Chapter 8:26. It was him again. Ever since Yun Dai refused to enter his tutelage, this was the 4th time Qin Yu had ruined his plans at a critical moment. And this time he had no path of retreat. If he couldn't succeed, all that was left for him was death. Looking at Qin Yu in front of her, Luo, he wished he could eat his flesh and blood. His chest was filled with hatred. Kill him, kill him. The black hole roared, and an invisible strength erupted. It was like an erupting volcano, capable of burning all to ashes. In terms of hatred, the shadow vortex's hatred for Qin Yu was 100 times stronger than Luo He's. Only the heavens knew how many years it had waited for this chance. Once it failed, it would be impossible to use similar methods to attack again. As for finding another path, who knew how many years it would take? Leave it to me. Remember what you need to do. Kill this person in the shortest time possible, the little blue lamp calmly said. In the next moment, the phantom of a great sun appeared in the tomb palace. A terrifyingly high temperature caused the air to burn, releasing a blinding light. Bang! In the endless starry skies, it was like two astonishing stars colliding with each other at high speeds. A loud explosion erupted, and annihilating fluctuations covered the entire tomb palace. With a stuffy cough, Qin Yu swayed, and blood flowed out from the corners of his lips. He could clearly hear the pained groans coming from every inch of his body. Luckily, the moment the annihilating fluctuations erupted, the black hole in the tomb palace and the great sun phantom vanished at the same time. But through his connection with the little blue lamp, Qin Yu knew that they hadn't vanished. Rather, they had been pulled into another dimension during the battle. As for where this dimension came from, he had no idea. Taking a deep breath, Qin Yu looked up and locked onto Luo He. His eyes were icy cold, and without hesitation he stepped forwards. Whoosh! His body broke through the air, emitting ear-piercing sonic booms. He left behind a series of afterimages as he shot forwards like an arrow. In that instant of annihilation, Luo He was also injured. He wiped the blood from the corners of his lips and diabolically grinned as he pressed forwards. His blood-stained fingertips fiercely thrust into the air. There was a howl in his ears as a giant blood-red wolf appeared. It seemed to be condensed from a trillion seas of blood. The smell of blood around it was nearly tangible. It faced Qin Yu and opened its jaws, swallowing him whole. Starfall Archipelago. Not long after the shadow vortex erupted, news of the changes in the secret realm had already reached them. The higher-ups of the Alliance were shaken, and they immediately responded. However, what shocked and angered them was that the teleportation hall leading to the arcane realm had been sealed for some reason. Biggie Douglas's face was as calm as still water. He looked into the depths of the endless sea realm and said in a sonorous voice, Use the token to summon the Alliance Guardian. The expressions of the Alliance higher-ups behind him changed. Based on the agreement they had made with the Protectors, every time they attacked, the Alliance would have to pay a high price. Even with the Alliance's wealth and foundation, they would still feel the pain of slicing their flesh. But in the end, no one objected. The existence of a mystic realm could be called the foundation of the Beast Trainer Alliance. If there was a problem with it, the Beast Trainer Alliance might be able to continue existing, but it would be difficult for them to regain their current strength and status. After a while, a large bell that had been sealed for tens of thousands of years was taken out from the depths of the treasury. As Biggie Douglas hammered down heavily, a bell chime that could not be heard by human ears instantly spread out of the island and rushed into the boundless sea. The sound of the bell continued onward, onward, and onward. Finally, it entered a region of the sea that was shrouded in fog all year round. The blood wolf howled in pain. Its abdomen rapidly expanded and then exploded in the next moment. Qin Yu didn't pause at all. He punched forwards. Luo he was expressionless. All of his previous anger and resentment had turned into an icy chill in his eyes. Facing Qin Yu's fist, he slowly said, "Qin Yu, today you will die." Bang! Qin Yu's fist struck Luo he. But a strange scene occurred. Luo he was like a shadow that instantly evaded Qin Yu. A wild strength erupted, shaking space. Like water being stirred, Luo he's figure twisted and deformed. But there was no pain on his face. "It's useless. My path of shadow transformation has reached large success. To you, I am a shadow, and to me, you are also a shadow. And no matter how formidable a shadow is, it cannot cause any damage. Just this point alone puts me in an invincible position." Path of shadow transformation. Qin Yu frowned for a moment before composing himself. "I am a shadow, and you are also a shadow. You cannot kill me." "Luo," he lightly said, "I don't need to kill you. As long as I can delay you long enough to destroy that strength within your body, I will have already won." Qin Yu said, "Are you so confident that the shadow vortex will win?" Luo he's eyes flashed. "It looks like you know a great deal. If so, then you should be well aware of what this will represent. To make an enemy of a world, no matter who it is, their final fate is to be utterly destroyed." Qin Yu coldly sneered. "If you really believe so, then we can continue waiting and see just who will be the final victor." The spatial shaking gradually subsided. Luo he's figure returned to normal. After a moment of silence, he revealed a smile. "Although I am confident in myself, it is indeed foolish to leave my fate in the hands of unknown luck. Moreover, I have already grasped the key to thoroughly killing you. Qin Yu, before you die, let me tell you something. My true name is Shalyoha. Do you feel as if you have suddenly realized something? But it is already too late." The corners of Luo he's lips curled up in a strange smile. Or rather, Shalyoha, who had transformed into him, suddenly stepped forwards. As his step fell, he vanished. When he reappeared, he had already fallen beside Qin Yu. He didn't attack. Instead, he met Qin Yu's gaze and melted into the ground, vanishing from sight. Then he sneered, his mocking voice ringing out in Qin Yu's mind. "So what if you are strong? In the end, the one to kill you will be your shadow. Then, strictly speaking, you will be the one to kill yourself. Don't you find this hard to believe? But please believe me, this will soon happen. And even if you know, you will be powerless to resist. You will only be able to watch helplessly on as your shadow slowly swallows you up." The shadow beneath Qin Yu's feet suddenly turned its head, as if staring straight at him. A cold and sinister aura floated in the air. But at this time, Shalyoha miserably cried out, his voice filled with shock and disbelief. "Impossible! You clearly haven't cultivated the path of shadow transformation. So why is your shadow world like this?" The shadow beneath Qin Yu fiercely struggled. Shalyoha wanted to escape. but he discovered that shackles had already wrapped around his body and he couldn't break free. Chinyu! Chinyu! Just who are you? I can't accept this, I can't accept this. Sha Liuha's hateful screams gradually faded away. Chinyu revealed a look of surprise. He rubbed his temples, a bit understanding. It was true that he hadn't cultivated the path of shadow transformation, but Undying had always lived in his shadow. It was clear that before he left, he had made some arrangements in Chinyu's shadow world. In these past years, Chinyu hadn't encountered such an attack, so he hadn't noticed it until Sha Liuha hit the jackpot. He originally thought that there would be a great battle, but who would have thought that things would end so easily? And Luo, he was actually Sha Liuha. This also explained why Chinyu felt an inexplicable sense of disgust and hostility towards him at first glance. Bang! The void shook and two layered worlds appeared in Chinyu's line of sight. One was a shining sun, and the other was a massive black hole that swallowed everything. This was that mysterious dimension. Sha Liuha had died, and the medium through which the shadow vortexes had descended was destroyed. The black hole trembled and began to collapse. He had won. It was only at this moment that Chinyu truly relaxed. Be careful! A thought fluctuation sounded out in his mind. This was the little blue lamp's voice. Chinyu's pupils violently shrank. An inexplicable sense of fear and alarm invaded his heart. Without hesitation, he stepped forwards. Bang! With a loud explosion, he rapidly drew back. But to some existences, no matter how fast Chinyu's reaction speed was, it was meaningless in their eyes. Within the mysterious dimension, the black hole's collapse accelerated and it instantly dissipated. At the same time, a black light shot out. It crossed the barrier of two spaces and smashed into Chinyu's chest. As Chinyu retreated, he could clearly see the black light approach. He wanted to dodge, but he couldn't react at all. Like a puppet, he could only watch helplessly as it sank into his chest and vanished from sight. Hum! His ears rang, and his consciousness fell into darkness. Within the tomb palace, a great sun phantom suddenly appeared. Boundless strength gushed out, supporting the fallen Chinyu in midair. A figure emerged from the great sun phantom. Without bothering to hide itself, it lifted a hand and touched Chinyu's body. At this moment, space fell into a deathly silence. The figure within the great sun suddenly gave off a desolate feeling. As it looked at Chinyu, its eyebrows furrowed together, its eyes filled with disbelief. Dead, he had actually died. Although the vitality of his mortal body still existed, his soul had been torn apart. The little blue lamp could feel that Chinyu's aura was fading away. When his aura vanished, he would no longer exist in this world. The little blue lamp slowly turned around and looked at the embryo egg. Its voice was icy cold. Why? The embryo egg was silent. You must admit that he saved you. You could have helped him block that black light just now. The embryo egg remained silent. The little blue lamp didn't speak again. It flicked its leaves and picked up Chinyu, preparing to leave. After Chinyu died, it would suffer backlash and soon fall into a deep slumber. But before that, it had to properly bury him. This was the only thing it could do for Chinyu right now. Hum! The silent embryo egg suddenly erupted with light. The little blue lamp was sent flying away. It could only watch helplessly on as Chinyu's body flew towards the embryo egg. Chapter 8:27. The little blue lamp was silent. It looked at Chinyu, who was gradually sucked into the light around the embryo egg. Its heart wasn't as calm as it appeared. For you to reach where you are today, how much bitterness have you suffered? How much suffering have you suffered? How could you give up so easily? Chinyu, come back to life. You must come back to life. Within the tomb palace, an invisible will suddenly arrived. Its boundless majesty was indescribable, as if it could suppress all, even with the little blue lamp's level. Beneath the pressure of this will, it had no choice but to extinguish all light and reveal the palace lantern's true form. The entire tomb palace suddenly expanded until it was impossible to see where it ended. It was as if a new world had been opened and all that was left was pure white. Then black and gold lines began to appear, particularly striking in this pure white world. The little blue lamps fluctuated. As it stared at the black and gold lines that crazily appeared in the pure white world, it suddenly understood. No wonder its strength and might were so much weaker than it had imagined, so that ancient legend was actually true. It was actually, but like this, if Chini wanted to obtain its approval and borrow its strength to be reborn, the difficulty would be 10 times or even 100 times greater. His originally faint hope was nearly completely lost. More and more black and gold lines appeared, rapidly spreading in all directions until they filled the entire pure white world. When it finally finished growing, a heaven-shaking array formation would form. It could reverse yin and yang, life and death, and even change the sun and moon. Even the little blue lamp was at a loss as it faced this array formation. It could only feel the terrifying aura contained within it that could subvert and change all. As you can see, I have wasted a precious chance. Whether he lives or dies, that is all up to him. An indifferent and calm voice echoed out from all directions of the pure white world. It rumbled like thunder, shaking the trillions of black and gold lines. Hum, hum, the array formation activated. Deep in the endless sea, the terrifying vortex formed by the swirling seawater had already vanished. On the altar that was like the base of a great city, a phantom formed from interweaving light reared back its head and roared. A terrifying aura swept out in all directions. The giant sea beasts lying around the altar shivered and blood gushed out from their noses and mouths. Some even fell down, their bodies twitching unconsciously. Even so, the sea beasts didn't dare to make a single sound, and none of them dared to run away. This was because the existence on the altar was the supreme ruler of the endless sea, the only master that all the sea beasts submitted to. It was the sea god. The few powerful and intelligent sea beasts knew that their masters had been waiting for this day for countless years. But in the end, it failed. At a time like this, any existence that attracted the master's attention would be torn to shreds without hesitation. Staying silent might be able to survive, but this time their hopes were dashed. The phantom of interweaving light on the altar suddenly stopped roaring. It stared straight at something above its head. The entire sea seemed to sense the ruthlessness it emitted from its body, instantly falling into a deathly stillness. If one stood above the clouds in the sky and looked down, they would see that the most violent and bizarre part of the boundless sea had become calm without any warning. It was as if it had been wiped away by an invisible hand, and there were no longer any ripples. The sea beasts around the altar began to tremble. They could feel the shadow of death looming over their hearts. Roar! The phantom on the altar suddenly let out a roar, and the mirror-like surface of the sea instantly shattered. It was like a vicious beast that had finally awakened after countless years of slumber. Bang, bang, bang! The sea beasts that crawled around the altar were like overinflated balloons as they began to explode one at a time. Flesh and bones flew everywhere. Endless blood gushed out, dyeing the seabed red. The thick smell of blood assailed the senses. But soon, these pieces of flesh and blood flew towards the altar at an astonishing speed. They gathered together, erupting with an astonishing vitality as they wriggled and grew. Rumble, rumble. The sea crazily tumbled and giant waves surged into the heavens. Suddenly, a black shadow appeared from the seabed. It rapidly approached the surface and became clear. Bang! The sea surface shattered, and a massive creature drilled out from the seabed. It was shaped like a bull, and its body surpassed 100,000 feet. Its entire body was covered in thick black scales, and 3 horns jutted out from its head, fiercely pointing towards the skies. As soon as it emerged from the sea, endless seawater rose up, turning into black clouds that lifted it up. Roar! With a loud roar, its 4 hooves rapidly galloped forwards. It flew towards Starfall Archipelago on the black clouds. Within the black gold array formation, Qin Yu's figure floated in the air. Countless motes of light gathered around him, as vast as the stars in the sky. These motes of light drilled into his body but flew out in the next moment, unable to fuse with him. After an unknown period of time, a calm and indifferent voice sounded out. You have seen it for yourself. It isn't that I don't want to save him, but that he can't do it himself. The little blue lamp said, Give him some more time. You know that even if I wait any longer, he won't have a chance. Why waste the little time you have left? If you want, you can bury his corpse here. One day in the future, when I find the person I am waiting for, there might be a chance that he will come back to life. The little blue lamp was silent. It slowly shook its head. Even if that day comes, the one who comes back to life will not be him. Its eyes fell on Qin Yu. We have known each other for many years, and I understand his character. If this is the result, he would rather die here. I won't force you. Take him away. The little blue lamp flew over. The motes of light that rushed towards Qin Yu began to dissipate. But at this time, a fluctuation emitted from his body. The little blue lamp paused. It could clearly feel that time had paused for a moment just now. This was the power of time. On the verge of death, Qin Yu had controlled a wisp of the Tao of time in an attempt to save his life. But unfortunately, its strength was far too weak. It could only stop time for a moment. But the mysteries of the world lay in the fact that even the most inconspicuous of details could cause a final change. For instance, at this moment, the power of time that erupted from Qin Yu's body. Within the black gold array formation, the scattered motes of light seemed to be attracted by some great force. They crazily gathered towards Qin Yu, their numbers increasing by dozens of times and nearly submerging him. The power of time. The faint voice sounded out once more, but this time there was a bit more complexity to it that vanished. He is so young and he has such a high boundary, yet he was able to accomplish this. What a pity. What a pity it still wasn't enough. Even if he used time as a guide to galvanize the power of the array formation, a mortal body was still a mortal body. A weak bloodline and mortal body simply couldn't contain its strength. The little blue lamp stared at Qin Yu, roaring out in its heart. Qin Yu, this is your last chance. Wake up, hurry and wake up. A massive number of motes of light constantly fused into his body. In the next moment, they scattered again. Perhaps it was because there were too many of them, or perhaps it was because there just happened to be a change within Qin Yu's body. At some point, a mote of light drilled into his body. After stumbling around several times, it finally fused in somewhere else. Within Qin Yu's chest, the ancient's heart that had fused in seemed to feel something. After a moment of pause, it began to beat once more. Thump! Thump! It contracted and expanded, pushing blood to flow through his body. Even Qin Yu's own heart was able to beat once more. Blood flowed through his body. The speed at which it revolved became faster and faster. It emitted a loud crashing sound, as if it were a surging river. Chapter 828. Even an ant knew how to live. This had nothing to do with consciousness or intelligence, but was a powerful instinct. Strictly speaking, Qin Yu had already died. The reason his mortal body had revived was because of the black gold array formation that reversed the boundary between life and death. After experiencing life and death, his instinctive desire to live had been thoroughly activated. This desire represented a person's strongest will. It was strong enough to mobilize all the strength within Qin Yu's body. Thus, as the two hearts wildly beat in his chest, a trace of bloodline strength hidden deep within his body emerged. Many years ago, when Qin Yu was just born, it was likely that his bloodline had been ruthlessly extracted and stripped away by someone. But bloodline and life were compatible. As long as he was alive, the strength of his bloodline wouldn't truly vanish. It would only fall into a deep slumber. After his bloodline was stripped away, Qin Yu's talent was greatly damaged, and it was nearly impossible for him to step onto the great Tao of cultivation. But with the existence of the little blue lamp, Qin Yu's destiny had been changed. As he stepped onto the road of cultivation, as his cultivation grew stronger, this was in itself a process of awakening his slumbering bloodline. And the most critical step was that Qin Yu had fused with the ancient's heart. Its existence had become a turning point, and beneath the pressure of death, his bloodline strength had finally awakened. Although it was only an extremely small portion, the bloodline of that race was innately noble. The moment it awakened, a phenomenon appeared. Golden light gushed out from the void. It was magnificent and dignified, like flowing golden liquid that wrapped around Qin Yu. Golden lines appeared on the surface of his skin, rapidly extending until they covered every corner of his body. The invisible contained within his bloodline began to contend with the ancient's body. The noble and proud ancient naturally wouldn't allow a bloodline inheritor to be assimilated into the ancient race and abandon their noble race and status. Qin Yu's complexion paled, and the ancient's heart began to violently beat. Within his blood, two strengths crazily fought each other, both wanting to swallow the other. The bloodline of that race was noble, but the bloodline of the ancient was similarly formidable. In addition to the support of the powerful ancient's heart, the awakened bloodline strength fell into a disadvantage. A change occurred as the two formidable bloodlines fought. A warm and bright light gushed out from Qin Yu's body. This was the power of holy light bestowed upon him by the Tao monarch. Before this, it had been suppressed by the ancient bloodline, but now it was finally released. Bang! A storage treasure on Qin Yu's body loudly shattered, and everything else was twisted to pieces. Only a jade box remained intact. If he were clear-headed at this moment, he would realize that this jade box was the gift the Shui sisters had given him to express their gratitude. Ever since Qin Yu obtained this item, he hadn't opened it, so he didn't know what was inside. At this moment, the jade box silently opened on its own, and a stone flew out from within. Its surface was uneven, and the bottom of each pit was dark red. It was as if the blood rain had fallen from the sky and landed on the stone, creating these potholes before fusing into it. In fact, even the Shui sisters did not know the origin of this stone. It was an ancestor of their mother's clan who had accidentally obtained it. If this stone was placed by one side for cultivation, it could act as a catalyst, allowing one to achieve twice the results with half the effort. Thus, it was regarded as a supreme treasure. Later, due to an unexpected misfortune, the stone fell into the hands of the mother, who married into the Shui family and passed it on to her two daughters before she died. The reason Shuiya and Shui Qingqing had been forced to flee was also because of this stone. If they didn't have enough strength to protect themselves, then they would be punished for their treasures. There was no need to elaborate on this point. At this time, as holy light erupted from Qin Yu's body, the stone hidden in the box flew out on its own. It hummed and trembled before shattering into powder. 1 bead, 2 beads, 3 beads, 7 beads of blood appeared. And on the surface of the stone there were 7 potholes. It was unknown how many years they had fused into the stone, but they were still bright red. Suddenly, faint traces of white light were released from the beads of blood, becoming one with the source holy light around Qin Yu's body. But the feeling it gave off was even higher. Although it was only a weak light, just looking at it caused one to instinctively feel endless awe, as if they were facing a god. Whoosh, whoosh. With the sound of breaking air, the 7 beads of blood howled forwards. They struck Qin Yu, but they didn't cause him any damage at all as they directly fused into his body. In the next moment, the holy light around Qin Yu suddenly rose 100 times over. Like a raging fire, it wildly tumbled up and down. Countless holy spirits condensed. They flew up and down in the holy light, their expression sincere, respectful, and joyful. They loudly cheered and praised Qin Yu. The phantom of a towering, holy mountain appeared behind Qin Yu. There were 7 levels to it, as if it connected the heavens and earth. On each level, countless figures prostrated themselves on the ground, kowtowing and prostrating themselves in worship. If someone from the Western Tomb Divine Church were here, they would immediately recognize that this was the scene recorded in the scriptures of the Western Tomb Divine Church, where numerous deities knelt to the ground and worshipped the transcendent Tao monarch. This was a miracle in the truest sense of the word, because at this time, after fusing with the 7 beads of blood, Qin Yu was a true divinity of the world, and these blood beads came from the Tao monarch himself. In the distant past, the Tao monarch had personally descended to battle with the supreme elders of the ancient race. Although he had won in the end, he had paid a tremendous price. These beads of blood had fallen from the highest heavens at that time, smashing into the stone and directly fusing into it. At the level of the Tao monarch, let alone a drop of blood, even a strand of hair or a piece of skin contained a great power. With a thought, he could take it back without losing anything. But that battle had been far too dangerous. After barely winning, the Tao monarch didn't dare to stay any longer. He directly shattered the void and left this world. In normal circumstances, after he recovered from his injuries, he could open up a space channel and take back the blood. But not long after that battle, the Tao monarch had fallen into a deep slumber and hadn't woken up to this day. If it weren't for today's situation, then in another hundreds of thousands of years, perhaps the 7 beads of blood that fused into the stone would have given birth to their own will. One day, they would have been obtained by some lucky person, and the story of the bottle-gourd brothers would have developed. Of course, now that the bottle-gourd brothers had been stolen by Qin Yu, it was impossible for them to exist. Bang! With the Tao monarch's strength joining in, the situation within Qin Yu's body became even more chaotic. After a chaotic battle, a tripartite balance of power was formed. The strength of the ancient race was the strongest, followed by the Tao monarch's strength, and the awakened bloodline was the weakest. But if the latter two joined forces in a disadvantageous situation, they could contend with the strength of the ancient race. This formed a fragile balance. The 3 forces temporarily calmed down and watched each other with dread, all of them looking for a chance to strike. But the truth was that within Qin Yu's body, the ancient, Tao, and blood strengths weren't the only ones that had the qualifications to participate in this game. The 4th was the power of time that Qin Yu himself possessed. Although it was extremely weak in terms of strength, it was in no way inferior to these 3. The 5th was the power that shattered Qin Yu's soul and instantly killed him. It was the power that came from the black hole. Or, to be more precise, it was the power that came from the world will. It certainly had the qualifications to interfere. The power of time was weak, and after the world will killed Qin Yu, only a tiny portion of its power remained. When the ancient, Tao, and blood strengths fiercely fought each other, their influence wasn't too obvious. But when the ancient, Tao, and blood tripartite balance of power formed, the effects of these 2 strengths began to manifest. The power of time hoped to save Qin Yu's life. As for the world will, it followed its unchanging goal and wanted to destroy his body and soul. One to the left, one to the right, these 2 completely different directions. Not only did they not cancel each other out, but they instead caused an uncontrollable change to occur within Qin Yu's body. With the ancient, Tao, and blood strengths as the core and the power of time and world will as the wings, as they gathered together, it was like a switch had been opened, causing the 5 strengths to revolve. To use a picturesque phrase, this revolution was like pushing the rolling wheels of time forward. There was nothing that could stop it, and in front of time, everything would be crushed to pieces. Indeed, there was nothing that could stop it. When the 5 strengths were sucked in, they were firmly sucked in. This invisible and formidable restriction was impossible to break free from. Rumble, rumble. Within Qin Yu's body, loud rumbling sounds rose and fell without end, like the roar of thunder in the sea. An inexplicable aura was released from his body. The motes of light that gushed out from the black gold array seemed to find their way home. With loud cheers, they wildly poured into Qin Yu's body at an even faster speed. This time they didn't leave. Rather, they directly entered the vortex formed by the 5 strengths. It was like the strongest adhesive, causing the 5 strengths to fuse together so that they could no longer separate. Hum! Hum! The entire array formation trembled, emitting loud rumbling sounds. The black gold runes that formed the array formation each erupted with a rich light. The little blue lamp's main body flashed, and its figure appeared once more. Its eyes widened, shock and excitement filled its face. This was indeed a change that it had never imagined would occur. In this hopeless situation, Qin Yu had found a path to survival once more. 1 fate, 2 lives, 3 bloodlines. Indeed, destiny reigned above all else. It was impossible to guess at. It was clearly a hopeless situation where he was doomed to vanish into thin air. But in the blink of an eye, the situation had been reversed. This was a great destiny. Sure enough, its judgment wasn't wrong. Qin Yu was destined to not fade into the crowd. There would come a day when he would become one of the most dazzling existences in the infinite heavens. With a deep breath, the little blue lamp looked up and loudly said, "How is it?" The black gold array formation was quiet. After a long time, the faint voice sounded out, sighing a bit. "With his current level, there is no hope of him obtaining my approval. But now, with the 5 strengths added to his body, even though we are clearly enemies and cannot communicate with each other, the current situation has occurred. This is because his fate is not fated to die." The little blue lamp bowed, its expression solemn. "Please rest assured, although Qin Yu is small and weak right now, after today he has defied the heavens and changed his fate. His future is limitless and he will not disgrace you." The voice continued, "You should have already seen the problem with me. If you give your mark to him, his future path will not be smooth, not to mention a trillion thunder tribulations. He is destined to withstand countless dangers if something happens to him in the future. I fear his fate will be tens of thousands of times more miserable than today." The little blue lamp stood up. "I will borrow Qin Yu's gaze to answer your reminder. While alive, everything is possible, but after death, everything is nothing. He is not the person I have been waiting for, nor has he obtained my approval. But all sorts of lucky chances and coincidences have allowed him to reach this step. Perhaps this is the will of the heavens. Whatever happens in the future, it will no longer concern me." Just as its voice fell, the black gold array formation erupted. A terrifying aura surged out, shaking the little blue lamp and sending it flying away. Space flashed in front of it. It appeared where Qin Yu had shattered the ice soul jade bed. It had been forced out from the layered world. The little blue lamp gripped its fists, a carefree smile on its face. It had succeeded. Above the boundless sea, a giant beast with a triangular head like a bull roared forwards on black clouds. Wherever it passed, the color of the sea changed. Endless black clouds gushed out from nothingness, weaving together and blotting out the skies. Rumble, rumble. Endless thunder erupted as the clouds tumbled. Heaven-shaking rumbles swept out in all directions, illuminating the world with a radiant light. Monstrous waves rose up in the sea, roaring and roaring. From time to time, it would take the form of a giant beast. Occasionally, thunder would strike it, instantly covering it in a suit of thunder armor. Its momentum soared to the heavens. It was the sea god, born from the endless sea. It was born with its own consciousness and knew the destiny it shouldered. The Beast Trainer Alliance's mystic realm shouldn't have existed in the world to begin with. It was only because of the existence of the sky-piercing jade wall that it was preserved. As for the sea god, it was originally a consciousness that shouldn't have appeared in this world. It was only born because the will of the world pushed it forward. When it first developed its consciousness, the sea god followed the will of the world. It wholeheartedly wanted to destroy the sky-piercing jade wall and cause the mystic realm world to collapse so that the circulation of the world laws would return to the right path. But as it failed again and again, time gradually passed. The sea god suddenly felt a crisis. It and the Beast Trainer Alliance's mystic realm were one and the same. If the Jade Wall was destroyed and the mystic realm collapsed, there would be no meaning in it continuing to exist. It would only be destroyed. The sea god didn't want to dissipate like this, but it also couldn't disobey the will of the world. The will of the world had given it its only mission. This was something that had been instilled into its consciousness when it was born. If it resisted the will of the world, then it would immediately collapse and wither away. Soon after, a new sea god would be born, but it would no longer be related to it. It couldn't disobey the will of the world, and it also wanted to continue living. It didn't take too much time for the sea god to find a method that satisfied both sides. It didn't destroy the sky-piercing jade wall, but swallowed and fused its strength. After the mystic realm was destroyed, even if the will of the world didn't permit its existence, it still wouldn't be able to erase it. Simply put, the incomparably powerful sea god was only a pitiful consciousness that wanted to continue living. The chance it had waited for so many years had been destroyed at the critical moment. The sea god was incomparably angry, but it could still suppress its anger. This was because as long as the jade wall existed and the mystic realm wasn't destroyed, it would have endless time and could continue waiting for the next opportunity. Moreover, the little insect that ruined its plans had already been erased by its strength. But not long ago, atop the altar at the seabed, the sea god suddenly sensed a change in the aura of the sky-piercing jade wall. It had opened the inheritance mark. It had actually opened the inheritance mark. This was the result that the sea god couldn't accept. Once the inheritance mark was completed, the sky-piercing jade wall would automatically dissipate and the mystic realm would collapse. The will of the world had achieved its goal, and it would be destroyed along with it. Without any time to think about who it was that had the qualifications to obtain the approval of the sky-piercing jade wall, the sea god cast aside all scruples and rushed towards Starfall Archipelago. It wanted to thoroughly kill that person. Otherwise, once the inheritance mark was completed, it would be destroyed. No one could stop it. Absolutely no one, bang. Chapter 829. The shattered space was immediately torn apart. The white ape that Chinyu had seen on the foggy island stepped out. His expression was cold, and his eyes were filled with ridicule as he looked at the sea divinity that had been sent flying away. He sneered, "I haven't seen you for some time, and it seems you've forgotten the taste of my fist. You actually dare to run up to me and act so wildly." Roar, the sea divinity roared. Its massive body came to a stop, and it glared at White Ape. "Today, even if it is you, don't think of stopping me. Hurry up and screw off. Otherwise today will be the day you die." White Ape secretly frowned. He wondered just what sort of stimulation this fellow had received. It seemed he was going to do it for real. His thoughts raced, and he sneered. "Just a loser like you dares to be so insolent in front of me." The sea divinity roared, "Kill!" Bang! Everywhere one looked, the trillions of seas instantly erupted. Monstrous waves rose up, sweeping through the world. In the vault of heaven, within the black clouds that blocked out the sun, the roar of thunder filled the air. Lightning howled and gathered, condensing into several thunder dragons. They roared as they dived down from the black thunderclouds, drilling into the monstrous waves. The thunder dragons wreaked havoc in the waves, inlaid with thunder. Their momentum rose even higher. White Ape spoke casually, but in truth, he didn't dare to be careless when facing the sea divinity. If he were in perfect condition, then even if the sea divinity's strength came directly from the world source will, White Ape would still be able to easily beat him up. But right now, it was best to be a bit more cautious. He didn't know what sort of madness this fellow had gone through, but if he were to fail miserably in a simple task, that would truly be a joke. With a loud shout, White Ape lifted a hand and pressed it forwards. His arm wildly rose, becoming like a divine mountain that supported the heavens. His 5 claws were sharp to the extreme and shined with a blue-gold halo as they slammed down at the monstrous waves. There was a heaven-shaking explosion. Giant waves rose up in the sea as they were split apart. Several thunder dragons cried out miserably as if they had been struck by an apocalypse. They all exploded and dissipated, but White Ape wasn't unharmed. After the thunder dragons exploded, endless thunder erupted, wrapping around his arm. Every white hair emitted light to resist. Even so, beneath the ravaging thunder, many of them were scorched and fell off. The White Ape furrowed its brows and clenched its claws tightly. The lightning that was spreading rapidly from the bottom to the top was suddenly pulled back and condensed into a lightning bead in its hand. Perhaps it was because it had condensed too much lightning energy, but this lightning bead was pitch black in color, and a terrifying aura that caused one's heart to palpitate erupted from it. "Here you go." With a sneer, White Ape suddenly flung the black lightning bead like a boulder, sending Sea God flying. Pitter-patter, the black lightning was torn apart. Sea God's eyes turned blood red. "White Ape, you forced me to do this." The violent aura around its body suddenly increased by dozens of times, turning into a raging sea in the midst of a hurricane. The black clouds in the sky suddenly became even darker, as if they had been poured with sticky ink, blocking the light and plunging the world into darkness. What was strange was that the sea below did not continue to roar. Instead, it fell into a strange tranquility. The seawater gently rippled, and there was no trace of the tyrannical appearance that it had a moment ago when it wanted to destroy the world. White Ape furrowed his eyebrows. He stared at Sea God and cursed inwardly. They had only fought for a single round, not even a warm-up, and now it had decided to burn its source? Damn it, this thing had really been greatly stimulated. Those people from the Beast Trainer Alliance definitely didn't tell it the truth. Damn it. Once this matter was over, he would definitely let them know just how terrifying the consequences of deceiving an old man were. At least 30% of their storehouse would be emptied. No, at least half. Qin Yu felt as if he were in a dream. In this dream, his consciousness was torn to pieces, and he floated emptily in space. Qin Yu could feel something constantly being stripped away, dissipating into the world. His consciousness became increasingly blurry and unclear. He began to worry, trying to stop this from happening. But in the end, he discovered that there was nothing he could do. He could only sense himself weakening bit by bit. His shattered consciousness gradually fell into chaos. After an unknown period of time, a warm strength surged in from all directions. It gently wrapped around the fragments of Qin Yu's consciousness, slowly piecing them together. It was like a jigsaw puzzle. At some point, when the last piece was pieced together, Qin Yu's consciousness woke up. He opened his eyes. What he saw was a pure white world. Within this world were inlaid countless black and gold lines. They wove together, exuding a mystical aura that he couldn't understand. A sky-piercing jade disk came from the endless highest heavens. It fell to the ground, with no end in sight and no beginning in sight. Within the jade disk, one could faintly see a vortex spinning. And within this vortex were 5 different colored streams of air: white, black, blue, red, and yellow. They constantly spun along with the vortex. Where is this? Who am I? Qin Yu had a blank look. He slowly swept his eyes over this strange world. Just as his thoughts fell, a voice sounded out, grand and calm, reversing life and death, returning from the world of the dead. Even if your consciousness hasn't completely dissipated, death is death. Even if you have resurrected now, this is the second life of your life. The memories of your past life have already been sealed in your soul. If you really want to know who you are and why you came here, you can only rely on yourself to awaken these sealed memories. Qin Yu closed his eyes. He thought back over and over again. In his blank mind, there were indeed some fragmented images, but the more he wanted to capture them, the more he couldn't. Finally, at some point, a fragmented image appeared in front of him. This was a small palace lantern, emitting a deep blue halo in the dark night. It was like the world's cleanest and most transparent sea, filled with a mysterious aura. This is the little blue lamp. Yes, it was the little blue lamp. Bang! The gates of memories opened, and all sorts of past events rapidly appeared in his mind. They occupied the vast majority of his life. After obtaining the little blue lamp, all of his memories were restored in several breaths of time. But this wasn't the end. After a brief pause, Qin Yu's memories continued to appear. This time, they were his memories from before he obtained the little blue lamp. The speed was fast. In the blink of an eye, the icy cold rain of his childhood appeared. He hid under the eaves, shivering in the cold. Just as he felt he couldn't hold on and was about to faint, Auntie Gu opened the door and brought him home to take care of him. That was the warmest and most peaceful time of Qin Yu's life. Gu Ling followed behind him all day, shouting, Big brother, wait for me." But as he continued forwards, his memories became blurry. Perhaps it was because he was in too much pain, so he instinctively chose to forget, or perhaps some people didn't want him to remember, so they erased them. Qin Yu's head began to ache. He grabbed his head with both hands and fell to the ground. As for the memories that gushed out, they continued forwards. His memories became even more fragmented, like a mirror that had been smashed into countless fragments. They were all haphazardly piled together, making it impossible to distinguish what they were. "Ah!" Qin Yu roared out loud. Blue veins bulged out on his neck and blood flowed out from his head. Memories continued to gush out, but at an increasingly slow pace. The time it took to restore the memories of the first dozen-some years of his life had far surpassed the memories of the 100+ years after he had obtained the little blue lamp and stepped onto the path of cultivation. Suddenly, a scene appeared in Qin Yu's mind. It was a short mountain, and at the top of it was a building that resembled an ancestral shrine. It was blurry and indistinct, but he could see that the sky was blood-red, accompanied by the roar of thunder and torrential downpour. Pa! The scene shattered. Qin Yu fiercely raised his head and roared out loud. It was like someone had pulled out his spine, and the pain reached deep into his soul, leaving behind an indelible mark. Pain, fear, resentment, unwillingness, all sorts of emotions crossed through space and time, suddenly appearing in Qin Yu's heart. All of the memories that he had forgotten in the past had all returned. Where is this? Why do I remember this place? Why is it so painful? Qin Yu's body shivered. His pale face was devoid of blood. He tried his best to remember, but after this scene, everything fell into darkness. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't find the slightest fragment of memory in this darkness. Qin Yu fiercely looked up and roared, "Why are my memories incomplete? Why haven't they been restored?" An indifferent and grand voice echoed out, "You should ask yourself these questions. If you can't find an answer, then you can leave it for the future." Qin Yu took one last look at the scene and suppressed it into the depths of his memory. He took a deep breath and bowed. "Thank you for saving my life." As his memories were restored, he naturally knew the reason why he was able to revive. "There is no need to thank me. You were the one who fulfilled my request. I only gave you a chance based on the principle of fairness." The voice continued, "Now, you must make your final choice. I can fuse with you, but the mark will not be complete. I will need to swallow the strength within your body to complete the transformation. The transformation can succeed or fail. Both can be divided evenly. If you succeed, you won't obtain any benefits for the time being. Maintaining your cultivation unchanged is already the best result. Moreover, you will have to shoulder a tremendous amount of karma in the future. If you fail, you might be able to survive, but it will be difficult to preserve your cultivation. If you choose to fuse with me, you must begin now. If you don't want to take this risk, I can still send you away from here." Qin Yu looked up at the vortex within the sky-piercing jade annulus. He looked at the constantly spinning colors of white, black, blue, red, and yellow. Without hesitation, he said, "I choose to fuse with you." With his own strength, it was impossible for him to obtain its approval. He had died once, and countless coincidences and good fortune had allowed him to encounter this opportunity. How could he give up? Moreover, that short mountain in his memories, as well as that majestic and dignified ancestral shrine. Just where was it? Qin Yu needed to find that place and retrieve all of the memories that had fallen into darkness. He wanted to know why he felt such fear and hatred, and what had happened in that place. Qin Yu had a clear intuition that if he didn't choose to fuse with them, then even if he had the little blue lamp in his hand, he would never have the qualifications to step onto that short mountain. Thus, he had to take this gamble. Chapter 830. The 5 strengths could be absorbed by the jade annulus to make up for the incomplete mark. But the 5 strengths in Qin Yu's body all had astonishing origins. How could they be willing to fuse with other strengths and lose their own nature? Thus, changes occurred within the sky, piercing jade annulus one after another. What it couldn't tolerate the most was fusing with itself and helping Qin Yu obtain the mark. It was clearly the power of the world's destruction. It had been given the will to thoroughly kill Qin Yu so that his soul would scatter and he would never be able to reincarnate. Within the vortex of the jade annulus, white light suddenly erupted. The vast aura of endless years was released from within. It represented that it had lived through trillions of years, coexisting with the world, sun and moon, indestructible and indestructible. Even if it dissipated for a time, it would reform in the endless river of time. A pair of indifferent eyes appeared, icy cold and without the least bit of emotion. They fell onto Qin Yu. Thou dare to fuse with me? Rumble, rumble. It was like 1,000,000,000,000 bolts of thunder exploded in his mind. Qin Yu's consciousness fell into a blank. He could feel the heavens roaring, the earth howling, the seas and mountains issuing cold warnings to him that he could not take a single step out of the pool of thunder. Otherwise he would be beyond redemption. Countless voices, men and women, young and old, all of them screamed at him, telling him to crawl before the world's will. Only like this could he obtain its forgiveness. A phenomenon appeared. The world's strength refused to fuse with him, and the sky-piercing jade annulus maintained its silence. This was Qin Yu's own choice. If he encountered any difficulties, he would have to rush through them himself. After several breaths of time, Qin Yu let out a long breath. He looked up at the vortex and saw the icy cold drowning in the world's strength. In truth, this isn't the first time I've seen eyes like yours. To be more accurate, I've interacted with them several times. So, scaring people is useless against me. Today, I will fuse with you. If you want to settle accounts with me, then feel free to come at me in the future. The little blue lamp revealed a faint smile. It knew that the trial of the worlds, while that was the most difficult for others, was actually the easiest for Qin Yu. Bang! The white pillar of light in the jade annulus shattered. The pair of eyes looked deeply at Qin Yu, remembering his appearance and aura. Then they vanished from sight. Roar! With a loud roar, the phantom of a giant appeared in the blue pillar of light that represented the power of the ancient. This giant towered between the heavens and the earth, eyes as bright as the sun and moon. An ancient and boundless aura was released from the giant's body. It was like a divine mountain that supported the heavens, upright and unbending. The giant lowered his head, his eyes locking onto Qin Yu. Future generations, you should know that my ancient race was born to support the heavens and earth. Even if death strikes us, we will never compromise. Qin Yu had a calm expression. The ancient race has suffered a great calamity. In the present world, I might be the only one left alive. Today, I will give it my all. If I succeed, I, Qin Yu, vow that I will rebuild the ancient race in the future and restore them to their past glory. The giant was silent for a long time. Then he slowly closed his eyes. If I go back on my word, then my ancient bloodline will surely collapse. I would rather be destroyed than exist in this world. Qin Yu solemnly said, "All right." The giant turned around and disappeared in a single step. The green pillar of light shattered. Qin Yu took a deep breath. He looked at the black column of light in the vortex. According to their mutual connection, he could determine that it represented the Tao of time. Darkness represented the unknown and the mysterious. Perhaps this was the essence of time. It was only by chance that I was able to reach my current level and come into contact with the supreme Tao of time. To tell the truth, I've only touched a small part of it. I'm still far from being able to grasp it. So, I don't understand the characteristics of time, nor can I persuade you otherwise. If you still have your own consciousness, then there is something you should be aware of. We are one. If I live a wonderful life, then you can also shine. If I fade away into the crowd, then you are also doomed to be dim. Now, are you willing to help me? The black column of light fell silent. It seemed that Qin Yu's words weren't enough to move it. The little blue lamp's lips moved. A thought fluctuation spread into Qin Yu's mind. He frowned and slowly said, "If I become an emperor in the future, I will do everything in my power to help you free yourself. I will not go back on my word." The black column of light scattered. Like water in the depths of a cold pond, it wrapped around the white power of the world and the blue power of the ancient. Bang! The red light blazed like a raging inferno. It was dignified and noble, filled with boundless momentum. The phantom of the Tao monarch appeared. His face was stiff and his eyes were dull like a puppet. "Those who steal my great Tao are my enemies for a lifetime. Once I awaken from my slumber, even if I have to ascend to the heavens or descend to the yellow springs, I will tear you to pieces." Perhaps this was a mark left behind in the Tao monarch's great Tao before he fell into slumber. Once his Tao foundation was seized, it would be triggered. Let alone a Tao monarch who had slumbered for endless years and might never wake up again. Even if he were as fierce as the sun in the sky, Qin Yu wouldn't hesitate at all. "Tao monarch, the one who stole your great Tao is Qin Yu." Pa! The Tao monarch's phantom dissipated. Of the 5 forces, for had been broken, all that was left was the yellow column of light in the vortex. Qin Yu's eyes fell on it, a complex light in them. This was the spiritual strength of his bloodline that had been extracted, stripped, and yet had been restored. It represented his origin. Everything showed that, from the moment he was born, he shouldn't have been an ordinary person. But it was unknown what he had experienced. But he had ended up in such a pitiful state. If it weren't for the little blue lamp, Qin Yu might have already died, turned to dust, and never learned of this matter. Perhaps sensing Qin Yu's gaze, an old man appeared from the yellow pillar of light, his hands held behind his back. He was only a bloodline projection. But as he stood there, he was like a divine pillar that stabilized the sea. Everything around him was suppressed and forced to submit. This was potential. My people were born in accordance with the will of the world, and our bloodline is incomparably noble. Looking at the myriad heavens and myriad worlds, we are a first-class existence. If you dare to abandon it, that is the same as abandoning your people. You will be loathed by your people, and they will use thunderous methods to strip away your bloodline, reducing you to a mortal for all eternity. Qin Yu fiercely looked up. Strip away one's bloodline. Reduce one to a mortal for all eternity. Only by abandoning one's people and being loathed by one's people would one receive such a heavy punishment. But according to his memories, when he was tortured and stripped of his bloodline, he was at most a child several years old. What sort of unforgivable mistake could such a young child commit? What sort of inhuman pain would he have to endure? To be tossed around by his people and loved ones, to fend for himself. In his mind, the scene he suppressed uncontrollably reappeared once more. On the summit of a low mountain, there was an ancestral shrine. The skies were like a torrential downpour of blood. In his ears, he could hear the roars of thunder in the clouds, as well as the cries of a small child's cries of fear and pain. Qin Yu's complexion paled. The scene suddenly changed. He could no longer see the short mountain, the ancestral shrine, in the sky. Instead, he saw the small figure of a child. Several cold and powerful hands were tightly pressing him to the ground. Bright red blood constantly flowed out from his body, like ink that dyed the rainwater on the ground red. Fear, hatred, despair, brutality. All of these emotions surged into his heart, causing Chinyu's eyes to turn red. He lifted a hand and pointed at the old man's bloodline projection. So what if I abandon my people? So what if I seize your bloodline? I will wait for you. The old man angrily shouted. Unfilial descendant! He lifted a hand. At this time, a terrifying aura wildly gathered, causing the entire vortex to tremble. The jade pendant shook. An invisible will descended, interrupting his movements. How is this possible? With a hoarse cry, the old man's phantom shattered. Rumble, rumble. The vortex wildly spun, sucking in the shattered 5 strengths and beginning to fuse them together at an astonishing speed. White, black, blue, red, yellow. The 5 colors gradually fused into one, turning into a boundless blue and white that tumbled like clouds. Chapter 831. Bang! White Ape's giant body ruthlessly smashed down. The protective array formation around the island burst apart, like a fragile bubble. With a heaven-shaking explosion, dust rose up in all directions. The entire island was smashed into several pieces, and the seawater caved in. In the next moment, the island was submerged. The tumbling seawater was torn apart, and White Ape shot up into the skies. Its shining white fur was now scorched and withered in many places. Large amounts of fur had even fallen off, revealing its red skin and flesh. It was a distressed sight. It was clear that after the sea god used his ultimate move, it was difficult for him to deal with it. In fact, from the deep sea onwards, the battlefield between the two sides had been constantly moving forward, getting closer and closer to Starfall Archipelago. Now, they had reached the edge of the island group. The island that White Ape had smashed apart had been densely populated not too long ago. It was just that before they were sucked into the battlefield, they had been urgently evacuated by the Alliance. Roar! A loud roar erupted from the black clouds above. A triangular bull-like sea god appeared. Its body was towering like a mountain, and its blood-red eyes were as round as the sun and moon. Killing intent boiled within it. It lifted its front hooves and trampled down on White Ape that had just emerged from the sea. It's coming again! White Ape cursed, his face turning green. In his current state, he didn't dare to take on the sea god trample while burning his source. He rolled away in a distressed manner. Endless seawater crashed down. The massive hooves were so deep that they couldn't be seen. The submerged island had completely vanished. Damned Beast Trainer Alliance. Just what did these bastards do? Did they steal away the sea god's woman, or did they kill its son? They actually made this fellow go crazy. Over the endless years, both sides had fought several times and had a clear understanding of each other's strength. Because the sea god had always been wary, White Ape had always had the upper hand. But today, the sea god had entered a berserk state from the very start. He simply didn't care about his own losses and crazily attacked. White Ape couldn't withstand this any longer. If this continued, then unless he disregarded suppressing his injuries and attacked the sea god with everything he had, he would be finished sooner or later. But even if he could suppress his injuries and defeat the sea god, White Ape wouldn't be able to bear the consequences. Even if he didn't die, he would. Looking at the bottomless hooves in the sea, White Ape gulped. He glanced at Starfall Archipelago from the corner of his eyes, uncertainty in his eyes. But very quickly, it smiled bitterly to itself. Sure enough, it had gotten used to it. At that moment, it actually wanted to take more chips so that it could open its mouth wider and reap more benefits. But the truth was that the Beast Trainer Alliance wasn't the key from the very start. If it were possible, White Ape would have turned around and left. Although he had lived for many years, he still hadn't lived long enough. The problem was that he couldn't leave, since he'd already been implicated in this karma and obtained its benefits to protect himself. If he were to withdraw and leave now, then misfortune would absolutely descend upon him, and the outcome would probably be even more miserable. Just as White Ape was complaining incessantly and feeling anxious, the sea god suddenly let out a mournful howl. His murderous aura soared to the heavens. White Ape was startled and hastily raised his head. He thought, "What's going on? I'm the one who's getting beaten up. Why are you screaming so miserably?" But soon, White Ape couldn't be bothered with these random thoughts anymore. He stared at the sea god in the black clouds, and his heart raced, invading his mind. The inky black clouds violently trembled, and then with a loud explosion, they began to wildly burn. The flames were a strange, grayish-white color, and just looking at them would cause one to feel a deep sense of fear and despair. "Roar!" The sea god roared once more. Despair, anger, unwillingness, resentment, countless negative emotions wove together, nearly condensing into essence. The aura within its body wildly rose. If it had only burned a part of its source before, then now it had completely detonated. The feeling it gave off was like a living volcano, one that could swallow all things in the world at any moment. White Ape's complexion turned green. Who could tell him just what was happening? The sea god had been perfectly fine, but now it was risking its life. No, this wasn't risking its life, but that it no longer wanted to live. As a consciousness born from the world, the source of the sea god's strength was the world itself, and its source was the medium through which it used the strength of the world. Once it was completely burned away, it would lose all its strength and dissipate. The tyrannical feared the reckless feared the reckless. A sea god that didn't even care about its life. Would you be afraid of it? Qin Yu wasn't afraid at all. This was because White Ape was suffering for him. When the five forces fused together, the inheritance mark began. This was a marvelous and magnificent process. Qin Yu felt as if he had experienced countless samsaras and reincarnations, and every time he reincarnated, he was a bystander, witnessing the might of the great currents of time. The vicissitudes of time were nothing at all. This was because in the endless river of time, countless proud children of heaven were born. Each one of them was incomparably powerful, and with just a thought they possessed the terrifying strength to destroy the entire world. But even as powerful as they were, they could only be like meteors. They left behind a trail of light in the river of time before finally extinguishing and falling to the earth. Qin Yu could no longer remember how many proud children of heaven he had witnessed rise to glory in his samsaras, but not a single one of them had been able to escape the fate described above. Gradually, Qin Yu couldn't help but think, just what boundary could he reach in order to completely transcend worldly desires and become a true eternal existence? This thought became increasingly clear and intense. It gradually took root in the depths of his mind, turning into an indelible mark. Where the road to eternal life is, no one knows. Lucky future life form, I hope that you can take that step that I have bitterly sought and become your true self. The voice sounded out in his soul, low and gentle. In the next moment, Qin Yu woke up. He already knew the source of the mark. No wonder it was so formidable. It was actually after a long period of silence. Qin Yu bowed. I have no idea what step I can reach in the future, but I vow that I will search for the road to eternal life with all my strength. I will not disappoint the gifts bestowed upon me by my predecessors. The little blue lamp said, "You've woken up. How do you feel?" It looked at Qin Yu, a bit curious and probing in its eyes. Qin Yu's gaze fell on it. In his eyes, the great sun phantom instantly scattered and the palace lantern enlarged with it. Runes as thick as chains appeared on its surface, but most of them were incomplete. The damaged areas were mottled with rust, like a broken bronze mirror that had been exposed to the elements for countless years. The little blue lamp seemed to sense something. There was a buzzing sound in Qin Yu's ears, and the scene in front of him instantly vanished. He revealed an apologetic expression. "I'm sorry. I just obtained this ability, so I can't freely use it yet." The little blue lamp said, I can understand, but others definitely won't. You had best control over it as soon as possible. Before you have enough strength, do not expose the existence of the mark. After a brief pause, it continued, You should already know that there is a problem with the mark you obtained. It shouldn't have appeared, but since you obtained it, you are also included in the list of things that shouldn't have appeared. Yu took a deep breath and smiled. Nothing in this world is perfect. There are gains and losses. At the very least, I was lucky today. As for whether or not I will regret this in the future, I will leave it to time to determine. Chapter 832. The jade pendant pierced through the heavens, like an icy river that connected the heavens and earth. But now the surface of this icy river was covered with cracks, as if it would shatter at the slightest touch. Yu stood beneath the jade pendant. He looked up at the endless skies and slowly reached out a hand. The little blue lamp frowned. Yu, it's fine. I can feel that it hasn't truly been destroyed. As his voice fell, his palm fell upon the surface of the jade pendant. With a slight tremble, a faint layer of light passed over the surface of the jade pendant. It was like an invisible gel that wrapped around the cracked jade pendant. The little blue lamp was surprised. What it saw was a bit different from what it knew. Yu said, Its mark isn't complete. I used the fusion of the 5 strengths in my body to supplement it and just barely managed to make it whole. But perhaps because I provided a bit more strength, there was still a bit left over after the mark was mended, as you can see. After a moment of hesitation, a sharp light flashed in his eyes. He continued to say, With this strength, I can control the jade pendant to attack one last time. The little blue lamp immediately understood. It smiled. If so, then we should leave it here. The strength of the jade pendant, even if it wasn't complete, was still enough to reverse the situation at a critical moment. Moreover, like this, it would be much easier for them to leave. Otherwise, if the mystic realm was destroyed, the Beast Trainer Alliance wouldn't give up so easily. Should we leave now? Yu shook his head, a complex look in his eyes. Wait a moment. I still have one last thing to do. He closed his eyes. On the ground, Yu's shadow wriggled like a living creature. At this moment, the door to the shadow world was pushed open. Yu's consciousness entered for the first time. He indeed didn't understand the path of shadow transformation, but after fusing with the embryo egg, he had truly seen the heavens and earth. It wasn't difficult for him to open an entrance. The shadow world was incomparably vast. The gray skies and earth were desolate and silent without the least bit of life. A towering palace sat deep within this empty plain. Yu's consciousness stirred, and he appeared at the entrance to the hall. He pushed open the door and entered, arriving at the hall where Undying had once lived. His eyes swept around and finally fell on the ground beneath his feet. As Yu stepped down, the ground began to fluctuate. An entrance to the underground appeared. Stone steps led down until the end of his line of sight. Following the stone steps down, Yu arrived at a chamber beneath the palace. There he saw the altar and the unconscious spirit. He frowned, his eyes filled with guilt and gratitude. He raised his hand, and wisps of light appeared between his fingers. Wait, the little blue lamp suddenly said. The great sun phantom appeared beside Yu. Perhaps it was because its attributes were completely different from the shadow world, but it did its best to restrain its aura. Only a faint layer of blue light wrapped around the palace lantern. You turned to look at it. Yu, I know you want to save her right now, but you can't do that, at least not now. The little blue lamp went straight to the point. There is a great secret behind the demonic path altar, and you should be able to see some of it by now. If it weren't for her isolating the demonic path altar from sensing you, then the existence of the mark might have been exposed. Trust me, with your current ability, it won't be long before you become truly powerful. At that time, I won't stop you, but now is not the time. Yu frowned. If I am careful, I shouldn't be discovered. Perhaps I can think of a way to seal my connection with the demonic path altar. The little blue lamp said, I admit that you do have the ability to accomplish this, but there is still a certain amount of risk. Chinyu, you cannot afford to be careless in your heart. Otherwise, everything you have right now might turn to smoke, and you might even be buried alive. After a long period of silence, Chinyu looked at the sleeping spirity above the altar. He slowly said, I swear that in the future I will return your freedom to you. I will do my best to give you everything you want. He turned and walked away. He stepped out of the chamber and stepped out of the hall. On the third step, his consciousness returned to his body. Shwa, Chinyu opened his eyes. Let's go. He lifted a hand and punched out. The space of the mystic realm directly shattered, revealing a straight channel. After fusing with the embryo egg, there was no longer any obstruction in this space for Chinyu. Shwa, Chinyu stepped out. There was a brief period of darkness before him, but in an instant, light triumphed. He came out, but at this time his complexion changed. He looked up into the skies. Endless black clouds wove together like ink, and within these black clouds, a pair of giant eyes appeared. They were blood red as they stared at Chinyu, their eyes filled with endless hatred. At this moment, the world in Chinyu's eyes was filled with malice. Roar! An angry roar sounded out in the distance. Chinyu could clearly see some invisible lines gathering in the world like cables, drawing together into a massive shadow. This shadow possessed a terrifying strength that left one's heart racing. But now, the lines that formed this shadow were constantly collapsing. Although the speed didn't seem fast, once they formed momentum, they would collapse in the blink of an eye. A mass of memories appeared in Chinyu's soul. He immediately knew the source of the eyes that were staring at him. Sigad. Chinyu whispered, a dignified expression on his face. Perhaps this was the first test he would face after fusing with the embryo egg, and this test involved life or death. If he couldn't rush through it, he would be dragged down by the enraged sea god, and they would fall into a hell beyond redemption. Bang! Terrifying fluctuations of strength erupted. Even though he was far away, Chinyu could still clearly feel how horrifying this strength was. Chinyu's heart raced. He turned and left without hesitation. Although he didn't know who was fighting the sea god right now, leaving now was the best choice for him. As long as he could delay for some time, the sea god would be erased by the world and he would be safe. Chinyu was fast, but someone was even faster. With a whistling sound, White Ape howled as he flew towards him. His chest had caved in, and as he passed by Chinyu, he could even hear the sounds of bones breaking and groaning. White Ape felt his heart ache. He lamented his pitiful fate. Even though he had struggled to survive until today, he still couldn't avoid death. Damn it, he couldn't care less. If a tiger didn't show its might, people would think it was a sick cat. Even if he was going to die, he still had to ruthlessly knock down the sea god. He had to let this fellow know that even if he was an extension of the world's will, he was still nothing in front of Uncle White Ape. As White Ape wildly flew backwards, he narrowed his eyes. But at this time, a figure flashed in front of him. Woo! He looked a bit familiar. White Ape's eyes widened. It was this boy. Why was he here? Chinyu cried out in alarm. Senior White Ape. He immediately reacted. The one who had blocked the sea god just now was him. But now, White Ape had been sent flying backwards. He clearly wasn't the sea god's match. In other words, Chinyu's plan to escape and delay for some time until the sea god was erased by the world had completely failed. Bang! Black clouds roared forwards like a tide. Chinyu looked up and met the sea god's eyes in the clouds, his killing intent soaring to the heavens. Chinyu groaned inwardly. After fusing with the fetal egg, it was more like he had improved his foundation and martial talent. He hadn't obtained any additional strength at all. Facing the sea god that was on the verge of death, White Ape could only be beaten. If it were Chinyu, he would likely have fallen to his knees in a single clash. He couldn't escape, and he couldn't fight. As Chin Yu's vision darkened, he heard White Ape's roar in his ears. "Junior, don't be afraid. Come to my side." White Ape had been sent flying backwards. Now he stood up straight. There was a loud crackling sound from within his body, as if he were tearing apart layers of cloth that wrapped around him. An extremely tyrannical aura gushed out from within. White fur rapidly drilled out from the exposed skin of his body. In the blink of an eye, his body was restored to its original state. His fur shined with a brilliant light like a great sun had descended upon the world, majestic and awe-inspiring. Chin Yu was overjoyed. He never imagined that White Ape, who had been beaten miserably just a moment ago, would suddenly transform into a big boss. Sure enough, the heavens never barred one's way. He took a step forward, but before he could escape, a boundless strength descended from nothingness. It was like several hundred mountains were ruthlessly smashing down on his head. Even with the intensity of Chin Yu's mortal body, he still felt his chest tighten and his complexion pale. This was because he had sensed that the situation was far from good and had shifted his body slightly to avoid the strongest point of the strength. Otherwise, he feared his bones would have been broken. The black cloud that had been incomparably far away just a breath ago was now right in front of him. The sea god opened its great maw and ruthlessly bit down at Chin Yu. "Humph!" White Ape sneered. He appeared beside Chin Yu and punched out a fist. His fist collided with a sharp horn on the sea god's head. There was the sound of metal colliding, like the roar of thunder. With a heaven-shaking explosion, the black cloud instantly disintegrated, revealing the sea god's towering, mountain-like body. It tumbled backwards, and the horn on its head that had been punched snapped in half. White Ape protected Chin Yu as he drew back. Every step he took caused a loud explosion, causing the entire space to tremble. Looking at the sea god's broken horn, White Ape sneered in a carefree manner. "You bastard! You've chased me around for so long. Today I let you know why flowers are so red." White Ape stretched out a claw and pierced through space. It was unknown where he went, but he pulled out the chicken overlord. This fellow was still in a deep sleep, but he looked much more miserable. Most of the gorgeous feathers on his body had fallen off, and the hard feather on his lower body drooped weakly, as if he had gone through 18 kinds of torture. Chin Yu was stunned. Even at this time, he still couldn't help but have some random thoughts pop up in his mind. Did White Ape actually have such a hobby? Luckily, at this time, White Ape's eyes were tightly locked onto the sea god. His mind was filled with thoughts of completely destroying it before he died, so he didn't notice the change in Chin Yu's expression. Otherwise, he would have spat out a mouthful of blood and kicked Chin Yu away. "Take it and leave. Although this disappointing thing has lost this old man's face, for better or worse, it is still a descendant of my bloodline. Take good care of it in the future, as repayment for me saving your life today." A chicken and a white ape, what descendant? Even if they were a crossbreed, the difference in breed was far too great. TSK, what heavy taste. Chin Yu suppressed all of these random thoughts. He picked up the chicken overlord and shot off into the distance, his speed even faster than before. "White Ape, little bastard, I don't ask you to stay and fight alongside me, but for better or worse you should at least pretend to stay. You actually ran away so fast." But thinking about it, Chin Yu running away so fast meant he had some self-awareness. With little Wild by his side, it shouldn't be easy for him to die. As the sea god tumbled away, it saw Chin Yu leave. Its eyes nearly popped out of their sockets. The reason it ended up in such a state was all thanks to this brat. So how could it stare on helplessly as he escaped? "If I can't live, then you will die with me." Bang! A wild strength erupted from its body. White Ape diabolically grinned. "Good. Sea God, those that dared to challenge me have already knelt down and surrendered. The next one will be you. Little fellow, did you forget how fierce Sir White's fist was just now? You actually dare to bare your fangs in front of me? Sir White's life's achievements are glorious. I will not let you set a precedent. Pung. Chapter 833. Seeing Chinyu turn and leave, White Ape could comfort himself by saying that he knew his own limits and wouldn't die easily. But the sea god absolutely couldn't endure this. He was about to be erased by the world, and his only remaining thought was to drag Chinyu down with him. There was a sudden roar behind him. Chinyu's heart shrank as a chill ran through his body. Then he discovered that there was an invisible barrier in the world around him. It was like an invisible bowl had been turned upside down, imprisoning him, the sea god and White Ape together. Of course, descriptions were just descriptions. In truth, this bowl had a bottom. Chinyu tried to fly out from below, but was soon blocked. Chinyu took a deep breath, and a dark gold light appeared in his eyes. The invisible barrier in front of him immediately revealed its true nature. Numerous threads that were extremely fine like silk interweaved with each other, and every single thread contained boundless and mighty power. This was the strength that came from the will of the world. Chinyu didn't have time to think about how the soon-to-be-destroyed sea god could still summon the strength of the world's will. His eyes darkened and his complexion turned ugly. This was because the range of the barrier was shrinking. In other words, if he couldn't rush out, then the area he could dodge would become increasingly small. Finally, he would be pulled into the battle between White Ape and the sea god. If things really reached that step, then even if Chinyu's body was made of steel, he would still be ground to dust. He couldn't sit here and wait for death. Bang, bang! Behind him, the battle between the sea god and White Ape erupted once more. Because of the existence of the invisible barrier, the shock waves of energy from both sides were limited to a narrow range, causing the impact to become even more intense. Chinyu was like a reef in the sea. His aura sank as he allowed the shock waves to strike him. As he steadily retreated, his eyes locked onto the area in front of him. A dark gold light flashed in the depths of his eyes. After several breaths of time, he lifted a hand and pointed. When this finger fell on the barrier, it felt extremely tough. There was even a shaking force that traveled up his finger bones, causing his entire arm to feel numb. But Chinyu revealed an excited expression. He could clearly see that beneath the strength of this finger, the several lines that formed the barrier began to collapse and disintegrate. It was effective. Senior White Ape, please do your best and help me buy enough time. Pa! Chinyu's finger fell a second time. At this moment, the confident White Ape, who had managed to stall the sea god, was at a loss. If it could, it really wanted to shout to the heavens, F***CK. You've been watching from the sidelines for so many years. Why are you so brazenly helping it cheat today? That's right. Just by relying on Sea God's own strength, White Ape would be able to easily beat him if he released the suppression of his internal injuries. But now, White Ape was facing an upgraded version of the Sea God who had been strengthened by the power of heaven and earth. Moreover, he was in a completely crazy and reckless state. White Ape had only enjoyed himself for a few moments, when he realized that he was starting to feel strained. He immediately felt stifled. This old man's glorious battle achievements have always been me pressing others to the ground and rubbing them. Could it be that I'm about to die, so I'm going to be ruthlessly ravaged by others? How could the ape endure this? No, I can't fail. So what if I cheat? This old man will still beat you until your face is covered in blood. White Ape's heart was filled with hatred, and he swung his fists even more violently. But this world was never one where anyone could do as they pleased. Bang! A fist smashed into the sea god's face. White Ape's face twisted, and several teeth flew out from his gaping maw. With loud splashes, they smashed into the sea, causing massive waves to splash up. White Ape didn't have the least bit of happiness on his face. Instead, his expression became strange. In the next moment, he was sent flying backwards. The sea god had struck him in the chest. Blood wildly gushed out, and his bones were absolutely broken. White Ape's vision darkened, and he nearly fainted. Without waiting for the White Ape to recover, the black cloud whizzed over, like a thick curtain, and wrapped around it. Then the sea below wildly roared. Endless water vapor rose up, supplementing the black clouds and causing them to grow in size, completely submerging the sea god and white ape. Rumble, rumble. The black clouds violently tumbled, accompanied by a heaven-shaking rumble. It was like 1,000 thunderbolts were roaring at the same time. From time to time, there would be muffled banging sounds. These deep and heavy sounds carried with them a formidable penetrative attribute. As they passed into the two people, their hearts trembled and they instinctively felt a chill crawl down their backs. Qin Yu's mind raced. Before he had time to think, his body had already instinctively dodged. In the next moment, the place where he was standing was filled up by the white ape's body. It smashed into the barrier. Qin, you could clearly see that because it instantly withstood a tremendous impact force. The barrier rapidly bulged outwards, and lines began to rapidly collapse and decompose. This greatly increased Qin Yu's efforts. But not only did he not feel happy at all, but his heart sank to the depths of the abyss. White Ape had been defeated. Even though he was extremely close to breaking through the barrier, the sea god would only need a short amount of time to kill him. He no longer had a chance to escape. A trace of annoyance flashed in his heart, but he soon calmed down. Since there was no way out, he could only go all out. Of course, Qin Yu really did know his own limits. Thus, he didn't believe that he could rely on his own strength to fight the sea god. He still had to rely on White Ape. His thoughts raced. Qin Yu's feet fell, and his figure flashed, appearing beside White Ape. "Senior, how are you right now?" "Cough, cough, cough. Didn't I tell you to leave? Why are you still here?" White Ape coughed uncomfortably. He had an expression on his face that said, "You brat, you really are disobedient." Qin Yu choked. He thought, how could you not know why I'm still here? Pretending to be ignorant was a bad habit that couldn't be tolerated. But at this time, how could he care about such things? Qin Yu went straight to the point. "Senior, let's join forces to deal with it. Otherwise none of us will live." White Ape looked up at Qin Yu. Although he didn't say anything, the meaning in his eyes was clear. "You brat, you aren't enough." There was no way to refute this. Qin Yu hurriedly said, "Senior White Ape, I am not joking. This is our last chance." He leapt onto White Ape's shoulder, his eyes locked onto the black clouds that swept towards them. In Qin Yu's eyes, after these tumbling clouds were dispelled of all external appearances, they had turned into pure tides of energy. They surged endlessly, releasing a formidable might. But since they were tides of energy, there were ebb and flow changes. And the moment these changes occurred was when they were at their weakest. "Senior White Ape, this direction is going to release all of your strength." White Ape didn't know where Qin Yu's confidence came from. He looked up and saw a dark golden light flash in the depths of Qin Yu's eyes. His heart chilled and a trace of awe gushed out. He instinctively obeyed Qin Yu's words and punched towards where Qin Yu was pointing. Dong! It was like a great drum had been struck, emitting a completely different sound. The raging black cloud seemed to pause for a moment, turning into a massive mass of seawater that splashed into the sea. The sea god hidden within roared in pain. One of its giant eyes instantly swelled up, leaving only a slit. It glared at Qin Yu with a venomous light. "This is—" White Ape's heart shook. As he looked at the pained sea god, his thoughts fell into chaos. At this moment, all the questions in his heart, like a fog that had been swept away by a strong wind, suddenly became clear. No wonder the sea god had suddenly gone berserk today. He didn't even care about his own life to rush towards Starfall Archipelago. So its true goal was that brat Qin Yu. In other words, the reason this old man was being ruthlessly hammered was because he was suffering for him. White Ape should have been angry, but he discovered that he wasn't angry at all. In fact, he even felt a bit smug. That's right, he was smug. Although he didn't know how Qin Yu had done it, looking at the current situation, his guess was most likely correct. This brat really had some heaven-defying dog's hit luck. If so, perhaps he could also bask in the light and wouldn't have to play along with the sea god. Moreover, He might even obtain an even greater lucky chance and be able to completely escape from his current half-dead predicament. Senior White Ape, over here! Instantly regaining his composure, White Ape didn't hesitate. His body moved and boundless strength erupted, surging outwards like a tsunami. Sea God, you can rely on the will of the heavens and earth to cheat, but I also have someone behind me. I want to see just how you die today. Roar! The sea god roared again and again. But despite his great strength, he sadly discovered that he couldn't avoid White Ape's fist. It was like the moment this fist struck out, it had sealed off all escape routes. And White Ape's fist was aimed at the weakest point of its body. If it were struck, the consequences would be unimaginable. Without any other choice, the sea god drew back, curling up its body and using its thick skin to block White Ape's fist. Qin Yu's spirits rose. It was actually effective. Although his current strength was relatively small and weak, his field of vision was incomparably amazing. White Ape laughed. Brother Qin, I will listen to your commands today. Just tell me what to do. After guessing Qin Yu's current status, White Ape didn't dare to be arrogant anymore. Even calling him Brother Qin was like taking advantage of him. After all, if this status were to be known by outsiders, supreme elders from all over the universe would gather together and attract Qin Yu to join them, like a peacock fanning its feathers. Haha! One who survives a great calamity is destined for good fortune later on. That's what this old ape is talking about. Qin Yu didn't know that he had already exposed his cards. But whether they were brothers or not, it was fine as long as White Ape was happy. Senior White Ape. Call me Big Brother, or you can call me Old White. Big Brother White. Don't give the sea god any time to catch his breath. Strike his left front hoof. White Ape was overjoyed. Great. Just watch and see. Qin Yu had personally called him Big Brother White. Hee. Just these words alone were enough for this old ape to brag about for the rest of his life. In the future, once he raised his banner and wore the tiger skin on his body, I want to see just who would dare to talk to him about capturing him as a mount. Mount, I'll sit on your grandma's mount. As for this sea god in front of him, in White Ape's eyes, he wasn't even a problem at all, let alone the world's while helping him cheat. Even if it rolled up its sleeves, it wouldn't fear him at all. Today, with this old ape here, no one could do anything to him. No matter what wind blew in the north or south, they had to obediently kneel down and lick him. Bang! A heaven-shaking explosion accompanied the sea god's enraged roar. This was clearly his strongest attack with his front hoof, but when it collided with White Ape's fist, it actually felt numb. The boundless strength within his body fell into chaos, and he was sent flying away. It was Qin Yu. The sea god's eyes locked onto him. He had already noticed that White Ape was only able to grasp his weakness by following his instructions. As he thought about why he had this ability, White Ape's eyes turned even redder. He couldn't continue like this. Although he had temporarily obtained the support of the world's will, he hadn't stopped dissipating. There wasn't much time left for him. He had to kill him first. Roar! The sea god reared back his head and roared. The sea below began to boil. Trillions of seawater shot up into the skies, raising the entire sea by several thousand feet. He wanted to use the impact of the seawater to separate Qin Yu and White Ape. White Ape roared. His white fur began to shine with a brilliant light, wrapping around him and Qin Yu. In the next moment, the wild seawater submerged them. As soon as they entered the sea, the surrounding undercurrents began to condense. They shot out like arrows, causing White Ape to tumble about. Even though seawater flooded his field of vision, Qin Yu could still clearly feel the sea god's position. But in White Ape's current state, he simply couldn't follow his instructions. Time slowly passed. The light emitting from White Ape's fur began to weaken. He had released the suppression of his injuries in exchange for a brief period of strength. Now, the hidden dangers were beginning to erupt. If this continued, he wouldn't be able to last much longer. Qin Yu took a deep breath and closed his eyes, When he opened them once more, there seemed to be vortexes spinning deep within them.